This meeting will come to order. Today is Tuesday, March 1st, 2016. This is a study session of the Prescott City Council. I want to welcome everybody that's decided to come in today and hear how we discuss the various issues. Roll call, please.
Mayor Oberg.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Yes.
Councilman Lozelle.
Here.
Councilwoman Orr. Here. Councilman Shiska.
Here.
And Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
All present.
We have a number of discussion items today. I'm only going to take public comment on the first one because we're not going to have too many more future meetings on that. So I would like to get any public comment that you have on that. As far as the other ones, there's other opportunities for the public to speak on those, so we won't take public comment on those today. Go ahead and give us the first item.
Item 1A, presentation of proposed building, fire, and planning fee adjustments.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to talk about building, fire, and planning fees. And first we'll talk about the process that we've gone through so far and then what's coming up. We've had meetings with contractors, developers, design professionals, anyone and everyone we could get a hold of. We've had, our last meeting was just February 17th. We had about 40 people in attendance. The one before that, I forget the date, but we had about 70. So we've had a pretty good turnout. Just yesterday did a radio show on this topic. We're today in this presentation here, and then we're having another meeting in March 16th. And then Planning and Zoning is going to have their own commission meeting. And then we plan on coming back in May with the resolutions if that's what you guys wish. In 2002, we did a comprehensive study on all of our fees, and that's when most of the fees were set. And in 2007, we adjusted a couple of the fees, but all the fees basically have stayed the same since 2002. So they have not been adjusted since then. Some of the new services that we've looked at and getting feedback from the contractors, the developers, and everyone, is the congregate residence life safety inspection. We haven't had that before. We'll be moving forward with that. We only currently have one permit extension for 180 days.
Ask a question, please.
Certainly, sir.
Say one more time. You said congregate residence,
Yes, sir.
and that is inclusive of what?
Dormitories,
Any place more than one or two people live? Is that what you mean?
anyone that's more than a single family unit,
Thank you very much. And that's citywide.
citywide.
Thank you. And we have that in code, or we're going to put it in code, right?
We currently have it in code. We don't have a fee for it.
And do we do annual inspections for health and safety?
We have not as of yet.
But we can.
We can and we are going to.
All right. Thank you.
One of the other fees that we are looking at is more than one permit extension. We currently allow up to, under our current code, 3.5 years to finish a project. But you have to have an approved inspection after every 180 days. If that doesn't come up, then you can ask for an extension, and we're just moving forward with that. One of the other items is same-day inspections. There are times when someone forgets to call in, they have an emergency, they got to pour concrete, whatever. Usually those inspections will come at the end of the day and overtime hours, so we allow them to do same-day inspection. Normally, if you call in before 5 in the morning, you'll get the same day. This is someone that was doing that, calling us after 5. We're raising our minimum permit valuation, which is currently around $10,000. That's basically at $10,000 you get the minimum permit fees. We're able to adjust that up to $13,999 to give a little bit more flexibility so that more permits can be issued under the minimum. So here's the actual fees, and some have changed. A lot of these services we've been doing but haven't charged for. So as you see, the first one is congregate residence life safety inspection. That's going to be a $400 fee. That's going to include the building official, the fire marshal, the code enforcement officer, and doing the inspections and the research on that property. And like I said, that's across the city. That's for anyone that's not a single-family unit.
And is that an annual?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you start talking about congregate living, that's the reason because there's, several people that live in that facility? Is that why we're doing this?
Yes, it's by definition. It's not a single-family unit, so it's usually more than 4, up to 10. When you get more than that, it becomes a hotel motel under building code classifications.
What about facilities that serve the public on a regular basis, such as churches, that rightfully should be inspected because of the hundreds of people that are in those churches, or churches that have become using old structures like Miller Valley School now has a church that's in there? Have those been inspected for public safety, for exits and also occupancy based upon a church? And if not, why are we not doing that?
Miller Valley School, no, because it's owned by the school district, and it does not fall under our jurisdiction. But let's say they moved into Banana Tree, then yes, we would do the inspections. There would be all the life safety requirements, ADA, anything else, flooding, all that comes into place for that. Anything that's caused as a change of use. So in other words, if they would have started off with a building that met the requirements for a church, then they would have a C of O issued for a church. But let's say they came in and they wanted to put a church inside of Taco Bell. Now that's a change of use from a restaurant to an assembly for a church. They have to meet different requirements.
While we're on this, because there are things that aggravate me a little bit, when you start talking about other places that are public safety or fees that should be charged for the fire department to go in and look at those things, what about secondhand stores, and in particular your thrift stores? Do they have to meet the minimum requirement for ADA accessible, being able to have 48 feet, 48 inches of movable room? Their exits have to be clearly marked, not having storage in front of an exit door where they have it clogged up. Do we ever inspect those? And if we don't, why do we not?
Have not been directed to. We do not currently. Once a certificate is issued, then the occupants are required to continue with their maintenance, and the fire department does do some inspections. I'll let him speak to that.
Councilman Blair, once the building department has issued a C of O, their right of entry is severely limited. The fire department does do life safety inspections on a 2-year rotation for occupancy within the city.
Do we charge a fee for that?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, so we're talking about fees. When we're taking our manpower, our fire department, and they're having to inspect these facilities, whether they're a 501c3 or they're for profit, doesn't matter to me. Why are we not charging a fee?
We haven't up to this point, but that's part of this process. We were looking at, when we started this process, we were asked to look at cost recovery for development.
Okay.
We weren't looking backwards the other way, but it's certainly a conversation we can have.
I think it needs to happen. The more and more, thrift stores and things that are opening up and doubling in size, and, they need to meet the city code, and we need to be able to, charge them a fee for taking up manpower to make sure they're safe. Because we have a lot of folks that go in those places, and if we don't know they're safe, then we're the ones in violation, I think.
And I believe that with another presentation that's going to take place later, that was something that we were looking at with the building licenses.
So Randy, if I understand you correctly, this is a one-time inspection when there's a change of use? Or are we going to start with every congregate residence in the city and do an inspection?
My understanding is that every congregate living facility will kind of have to register, pull the permit, we will go out and do the inspection, and then it will be an annual inspection after that.
Annual inspection, okay, thank you.
As you can see, like the building department issue fee there went from 15 to 50. That's basically routing all the plans, putting them all together, issuing the actual permit, storage. As you can see, $15 doesn't really cover that kind of cost. Some of the fees have actually gone down. If you'll notice, electrical and plumbing have went down. Mechanical went up. We just averaged the cost across the board to make more sense there. Same-day inspections there, site investigation, C of O walkthroughs. The reinspection fees there you'll see is we now don't charge a reinspection fee until the 4th time. We're talking about knocking that down to the 3. Same with plan review. We currently don't charge you until the 4th time you failed. We're talking about moving that down to 3.
Randy, could you, just for everybody else, could you explain what reinspection would include?
So in other words, we came out, do an inspection, you called in for a footing. We come out and do an inspection. We leave you a list on the site written and tell you what needs to be corrected. We come back out, you call us back out, we come out and it's still not corrected. You call us back out a 3rd time, still not corrected. And on the 4th time when we come out is when we charge you now. We're talking about doing that at the 3rd time. So in other words, everyone would get the first inspection, a chance to correct it, and then on the 3rd time we would start charging you.
Another question on the additional plan review. If someone comes in back in a 2nd time and a 3rd time and you find something new that you hadn't told them about before, will they be charged for that 3rd review?
No, it'd be a 3rd time of the same unit or the same issue. But now let's say that they rewrote up that shear walls weren't correct. Well, now they've redesigned the whole project and changed the footprint and everything else. And if that wasn't corrected on the 3rd time, then yes, they would. If it was something that was missed, then no, it would not be.
Okay.
Now, we're also talking about limiting our inspections and our plan review. Currently on a residential project, on a reinspection, there can be up to 6 items as kind of an average thing that would come up on a rough. We're talking about stopping the inspection at 10 items and then having them fix it and redoing it. On a plan review, well, actually, I'm reverse there. On plan review, it's about 6 items, so we would take that up to 10. On inspection, it's about 3 items. We're talking about taking that up to 5 or 6 items. So that at that point, they haven't walked their job well enough or whatever's happened. They usually allow their subs to call in some of their inspections, and they may not be accurate when they call in their inspections.
Randy, when you're talking about permit review, and again, to clarify to the lay people, a lot of times you'll receive a set of blueprints where the detail is not there, and you're going through redlining, well, I need this, this, and this, when these are things that the engineer or the architect should be including.
Absolutely. We have an inspection checklist and a plan review checklist, so we tell them up front all the items that should be on these plans, and it's when those plans come in that don't have those required items that are needed to verify their.
So really, there's no guesswork. The instructions and the guidelines are there.
Yes, sir. Reissuing, that's kind of like them coming back in and changing out in the field. All of a sudden, they decided to add another 100 square feet onto the house. It's basically a second plan review for changes. The permit extensions there, the after-hour inspections, the investigation without work or without a permit. All these fees are, most of these actions are done already. We just haven't always charged for them. So what it really comes down to.
I have a question before you move to the next slide.
Yes, sir.
You know, recognizing and reading through this stuff prior to the meeting, and I'm not sure why, but maybe you can share some light on that. The certificate of occupancy walkthrough was 60, moving up to 150. Why the big increase there? And during the walkthrough, the occupancy, if the certification is done, does the inspector hand the homeowner or the builder a certificate of occupancy on site at that time?
We do not hand it on into them on site, but they can come in, get it printed out, and receive one, yes. CBO walkthrough is basically for facilities that don't have an occupancy. Some of the stuff we've brought in from the county, and there is no C of O issued for it. They're 100-year-old, we may not have it. And they need a C of O, they're going for some licensing or liquor or something. If we don't have one, we got to come up with one. So what we do is usually it's me and the fire marshal will go out, do life safety, any major code issues, and at that point we would issue one, and they can come in and have that posted at that point.
So it's more of a specific chore that we have to do based upon them never having one before.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
So what this really comes down to is the following. This is basically a 2,500 square foot house. This is actually pulled off a contractor who's building these here in town. So these are extremely accurate. 2,479 square foot house, 500 square foot garage, 158 square foot deck. You see the issue fees going from 15 to 50. Building permit goes up 125. On down the line there, if you notice, it's not a misprint, but on the mechanical fee, that's 2,479, because you'll notice that doesn't normally go in a garage. Mechanical's not normally in a garage, so we don't charge for that. What it all comes down to at the final there is $562.58 for a 2,500 square foot house. Now, if you'll notice, the valuation up there is $308,000. You'd have a hard time finding that house around here for $308,000. That house is normally going, from where we've done this, is between $600,000 and $750,000. What that valuation is based on is a nationally recognized table issued by ICC that does base valuations. For a single-family home, it's basically $131 a square foot, and that's how the permit is determined. You can get up to $200, $250 a square foot if you're doing a big custom home. So you'll notice that there's a big difference between the valuation of what we come up with to develop a permit cost and what an actual selling cost is.
Excuse me, Randy.
Yes, sir.
It took us from basically 2002 when we really looked at this stuff to now to really to evaluate and make changes. How often do you think in the future we should do this?
We're actually looking at building in a, based off the consumer index pricing, a built-in fee or adjustment up, down, just depends on what the CPI is doing. And that's basically what Public Works has done with their fees. So we've tied it into the same philosophy going forward so that we shouldn't have to be coming back and doing this.
Does this get us closer to corresponding communities in this area?
Actually, during one of the meetings, we have a contractor here in-house that built this house in Prescott Valley and built this house recently here in the city. What the numbers he told me was 9,800 here in the city and 15 going on 16,000 in Prescott Valley.
So my question is, even with these changes, are we still behind the 8 ball?
We are still in the middle. The county is a little bit cheaper, but they don't supply the services, the water and sewer. But we are still under by a fair amount from Prescott Valley.
Council, if I might comment.
Sure.
Again, as the city attorney has pointed out many times, the basis of fees is cost recovery. We have resources. The intent of these adjustments is to more fully recover the cost of providing the service.
But you said more fully. You didn't say too fully. You said more fully.
Well, you know, we never catch up.
Okay.
I mean, that's the reality. We never catch up because when times are booming, we add resources, and so we're constantly behind the curve. And then there are other factors which are going on. If you know, in the boom times, of course, you know, you commented that we haven't updated these fees for quite some time. When business was booming way back when, there was a lot of money coming in from the fees and so forth, and nobody really paid too much attention to it because it was all about issuing C of Os. Then the recession hit, and there was quite a bit of pressure to not totally shut down the building division, so we kept on in community development more expense than we might otherwise do, and then things pick up. And so, you know, we find ourselves behind the curve, so we never quite fully recover the cost. At least that's my experience. As far as the major differential between a Prescott and a Prescott Valley that the building official mentioned, the other component of that, which he did not explicitly mention, or at least I didn't hear it, is impact fees. And so that's the big difference. We are a full-service community. We charge an impact fee or impact fees and so forth. There are other structures. There are community facilities districts in Prescott Valley, for example. So it's not apples to apples, except if you're the buyer of the house and you are looking at buying the same house, as Randy pointed out in that real example of here or there. Sure, there's going to be a difference as far as the impact fees and the municipal fees, but then there are other considerations like the cost of the land and so forth. So it might be interesting to compare what that 15,000 versus 9 or 10,000 is, but there are a lot more factors involved in the pricing of that product in each of the jurisdictions.
Thank you.
So, like I said, we have some people here that will talk about their points on when you open this up, but that's basically what it comes down to is $562 for a 2,500 square foot house, and that's, unless you have any other questions for me, I'll be turning.
I've got one question. Sometime back when I was doing my visiting all the departments and finding out what was going on, one of the questions I asked was, are we recovering all our costs? And I was told at the time in several departments that we weren't. And I just want to know, right now, do you think we're recovering our costs for anything in the building department?
No. Now, and that's a moving target, though, because the multiplier that we use to determining permit fees are based on how many permits we issue. So last year we could have issued 100 less permits. This year we issue 100 more permits. Next year we're 300 permits up. So it's a moving, flowing target to hit. So we could hit it this year. Next year we will miss it. So no, we're not. We're moved a lot closer with these fees, but we are not at 100%, no.
All right, thanks. Any other questions, comments for Randy Plummer before we go on the fire? Okay.
It was about the congregate residence life safety inspections.
Could you identify yourself,
Oh,
please?
sorry. Hi, I'm Stephanie Cox. I work for the county. I work with indigent wards of the county. One of my concerns was the congregate resident life safety inspections, because from what I've read, I know he said that it was 4 more people, but I've heard that the developmentally disabled homes, the group homes, are going to fall under that as well. Is that true? Does that include their workers as well?
No, unless they're living there.
Okay, because from what I read, it said that it was going to include it. And so I just didn't think $400 is an awful lot. And I don't know if you guys know a lot about the disabled group. Sorry, I don't usually do this. This is my first time, so I'm nervous. But $400 is just a ton. And I feel like if it is going to affect the disabled, the group homes here in town that help people with mental health issues and help people with disabilities, and I'm talking severe disabilities, people that are going to have one-on-one people all the time. They're already suffering from the parking restrictions that have been placed on these facilities, because a lot of them, when they have 2 people in a home, they'll also have 2 or 3 people that have to work there with them, plus like a house van, so they can easily go over the parking restrictions that they have there. But I was hoping, instead of $400, if they could do something more like an hourly thing, something more reasonable, only because those funds are going to come most likely out of the state funds that these places receive. So, I mean, that's where it's going to come from. It just has to. Our people have no money.
So do you think that, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I should.
Yeah, we're not ready into public comments right now.
Okay.
I was going to finish
I'm sorry. I said, it's my first time. So
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and I'm following up on Randy on the building fees. And one of the things that Randy didn't mention is, as we went forward through this process, building and fire worked very closely together as we were attempting to cost out what it costs for an inspector to go out, what it costs to actually cover the costs of an employee to try to get to the cost recovery numbers. And we wanted to make sure that it made sense, that when we came up with a number from the city of Prescott, that an inspector was an inspector, that a plan review was a plan review. So as you'll see when we go through our fees, we've done very similar in the pricing. The only fees that you're going to see in front of you today are changed fees and new fees. Like the building department, the last time that we adopted a fee schedule was the last time that we adopted a fire code. Same with the building code that was adopted in 2007, was followed by a fee increase and a new fee schedule. So having just adopted the 2012 code recently, it was time to do this nonetheless. But the only thing you're going to see when you look at this sheet are going to be increased fees, because not all the fees increased, and you'll see that when we come to you with the red line version of our last resolution, and some new fees that we've added. So the basis for the decisions that we made with our fees is costing out an employee at $75 an hour, and that was based on development, not based on my inspector that does regular inspections, building safety inspections. This is for development permits being issued for new construction and remodels. And as we went through looking at $75 an hour, we looked at the number of inspections that we did, similar to community development. We're looking at our standard for the way that we look at things is for every inspection, it's followed by a re-inspection. So when we do a fire alarm rough, if they don't pass the fire alarm rough, the second inspection is at no cost, and that's rolled into the fee. And as you'll see when we go a little farther, we are going to limit our inspections to 2 inspections. First inspection, follow-up inspection. After that, we will be charging a fee, and that'll show later. But that's basically what it's based on. Every inspection has a built-in second inspection in the cost. It's built on the number of inspections that go with the project. So the fire alarm and plan review, under 5,000 square feet, we're increasing it to $375. Over 5,000 square feet, what wouldn't fit on this is there's also a multiplier per square foot. It's a small multiplier, but it does make up the difference over 5,000 square foot, so you can see that the fees are the same. Fire alarm system modification, that includes not only the plan review that goes with that, but the inspections that'll take place on site. New residential fire sprinkler plan review and inspection. We found that we were spending a lot more time on these than we thought we were in the past, the last time we did this, so we're increasing it from $160 to $225. Automatic fire sprinkler modifications, $75 basically comes to the cost of 1 hour of a plan reviewer to go through that. The most significant increase that we had excuse me, in all of our permits was the new installation commercial cooking hood. We took on cooking hoods out of the mechanical code, and the reason that we have an agreement with the community development to do that is because these are the hoods that require extinguishing systems in commercial occupations. So when we went back and we looked at the fact that there were 6 inspections plus a plan review, or a plan review plus 5 inspections required, we had to increase the price significantly to get to where there was cost recovery on that. We weren't losing money on these commercial hoods. Underground fire line, new installation access gates, again, it's based on the hours that it takes to do the plan review and to go out and do the on-site inspections. Underground fire line similarly. As we go down here, each one of these was based, like I said, on $75 an hour and the number of hours that we normally spend to get one of these inspections completed.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
On the $75 an hour, does that include the PSPRS cost?
None of my inspectors are in PSPRS.
Okay. Thank you.
That's ASRS costing. When we get down to commercial burn permits, what we were finding is we really had to increase this one because not only do we issue the commercial burn permit, but this community is not very smoke friendly. So what happens is we issue the commercial burn permit and then we get complaints. So we get people that are worried about whether or not there's compliance. So on occasion, we have to go back to visit the site to assure that they are meeting the requirements of the commercial burn permit. And we were finding that we were spending a lot of time doing that, and there was the fee that we were charging for it did not cover the cost to provide the service. So we went across to the $75 an hour plus $75 an hour per site visit or modification to the burn. Sometimes in the larger burns, they'll move around on a site. Blasting,
Don, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
Could you give an example of a commercial burn permit? I mean, who would do that?
A large development such as Sierra Peaks, where they're doing mass grading, they're taking out a lot of the native vegetation, and it's not cost effective for them to load all of that vegetation onto dump trucks, take it out to the dump, and then continue that. We allow them to burn it in place when they meet certain criteria.
Okay, thank you.
We got one other question here.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Devendorf, I want to digress a little bit here and go back to the cooking hoods,
Yes, sir.
okay? And are the establishments currently in the city of Prescott functioning in a manner that feeds people, okay? Restaurants, kitchens, Salvation Armies, whatever the case, churches, whatever the thing is, are they subject to an annual or biannual inspection to ensure that those hoods are still compliant?
Yes, sir. They're actually on a every 6-month inspection protocol for the hood extinguishing system. And at the time the hood extinguishing contractor goes in, he will also report back to us on the condition of the hood as far as grease accumulation. There's not a set amount of times that a commercial kitchen cooking hood has to be cleaned. It's based on its use, and it can either be quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. And when the fire extinguisher companies go in, if they find a dirty hood, they call us. And we just recently inspected every commercial kitchen cooking hood in the city based on some fires that we had in the last 2 years. So now we know what their inspection schedule is, and we are going back out on our own to check for the cleanliness of the hood, not just expecting the contractor who's doing the extinguishing system to report back on the condition.
So this has got the built-in cost recovery for the inspection.
We do not do the secondary inspections of the extinguishing system. That's done by a private contractor. We go back if the contractor says that the hood is not clean enough, and there's not a fee for that. Well, we're doing an inspection and tell them that they need to get someone out on a more regular basis to clean their hood.
Okay, well, who pays you guys? I mean, besides the
You do.
taxpayer. I understand that. But on the other hand, there's a cost to doing businesses and stuff. And if the fire department has to, I mean, I'm trying to get a grip on what we're actually trying to do on a twofold issue. Number one, it's this, and number two, it's the business license. And we're taking a look and we're talking about cost recovery. Okay? So that's what I'm trying to get a grip on, what's actually being proposed to us with these fees.
What we're bringing to you, Mayor Pro Tem, is development-related fees. That was the focus of our fee schedules, is we were looking at the permits that were coming in and looking at whether or not our fees covered the cost of development, new building, and remodeling. We were not asked in this particular project to go back and look at the normal day-to-day operations of the organization and attempt to assess fees to those.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Blair.
Just a quick comment on the commercial burning permit. Pioneer Park, or not, at Prescott Lakes Parkway, county burning out there, do we charge them a fee?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There is a cost recovery from them then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on, blasting is similar to commercial burn permits. This community is not a blast-friendly community. With that, we put an inspector at every blast site so that we can actually have firsthand knowledge of whether or not the contractor performed in the manner that they're required to, following their own industry standards that are also covered by the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association standards. So with the recognition is that we were spending a lot of time on blast sites, and we weren't recovering the cost of the inspectors on those. So for both of those, it's the initial plan review and the issuance of the permit, as well as $75 for each visit to the site for each blast. One question that came up earlier about whether or not we charge for annual inspections. This next line is an area that we do. State Department of Health Services and county required inspections, we do charge for those as we go out. So there is cost recovery, but for the inspections that we do within the city for businesses, we at this point do not charge for those inspections. After-hour inspections, as the building department did, we've increased it to $75 an hour. And then the next three is our recovery when I was speaking about the projects where we have to go back multiple times. So when you see the sprinkler inspections, residential and commercial, and the fire alarm inspections greater than 4, that means we did the initial inspection, we did a re-inspect, and then we went past the next inspection for another re-inspect. They're still not done. We're going to begin charging $75 an hour with a 1-hour minimum for those.
Got another question here, Councilwoman Wilcox.
Does your department inspect carnivals?
Next page,
Oh.
Councilwoman.
There you go.
Reading ahead, were you?
Yeah.
Carnivals and fair inspections. In the past, we had just charged a flat $200 fee, but our recent experience with the county fair coming into town, we had 4 inspectors out there for the better part of a day in order to make sure that everything was being done properly. So we decided to, again, using the $75 an hour fee, change that so that it was actually paying the cost associated with having all the inspectors out there that needed to be there. Standby fire personnel, again, this was just a fee adjustment based on cost of employees from $50 an hour to $75 an hour when fire personnel are required to stand by. And then the second one has this fire personnel, but also on occasion they'll require an engine company. And we went from $120 an hour to $138 an hour because that's the contract rate that we have with the state of Arizona. That's what they consider a value to a Type 1 engine company. So we changed to that number so that we could be in line with them.
Do we have a question, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. The question with regards to carnival brings up a question with regards to rodeo grounds. Do we also inspect the rodeo grounds to ensure that the people we ask here to come watch the rodeo and drop their money at the rodeo and in town, that the facility out there is safe?
Yes, sir, we do when there's an event out there.
Okay.
And then the reason for that is the Rodeo Association takes and puts all the extinguishers away when there's not an event, and there will be chains on door. I mean, when the rodeo grounds isn't being used for an event, if we went through there, they would fail the inspection every time. So they only prepare themselves for a mass of people prior to an event. So we go out just prior to that event to make sure all of the life safety functions are working.
Okay, so, and that would be covered if we used the rodeo grounds for other than the rodeo?
If we made a decision that the rodeo grounds were going to be used all the time, then it would fall into our standard inspection rationale. Right now, we actually treat it as a special event where when we know that they're going to have an event out there, then we do an inspection.
Thanks.
I have one question. That is, when you talk about the rodeo and their events, you know, during the summertime, they have quite a few events.
Yes,
and a lot of times the participants come in 2 or 3 days before they actually have the competition or whatever they have. So are you out there at the start of the participants coming in, or do you only go out there and inspect at the time that the public's going to be there observing an event?
We inspect prior to the event, sir.
Okay, great.
So Chief, on the 138 an hour, that's for an engine?
Yes, ma'am.
With 3 people, I would assume?
That's just the vehicle, and it's $75 an hour per employee that's on the engine.
Okay. But those are not inspectors, those are firemen?
Those are firefighters.
Yeah.
Certain events require that an engine company stand by. So
Right.
this is for the firefighters and their truck to stand by at the event.
That amount just seems low if you have 3 firemen on it. Is that a...
That's only the
Just a
vehicle. It's
standard?
$75 an hour per employee, and we send 3 employees. So that's $225 an hour for employees plus $138 an hour.
All right, okay.
And then the only new fees that we are bringing forward, special event inspection fee. I put an inspector in town pretty much every weekend throughout the summer, inspecting for fire lanes, cooking operations in tents that they come along with, like the downtown events. You know, one of the ones we deal with on a regular basis is the kettle corn guy. And he does it right, but nonetheless, we have to make sure when there's cooking in a canopy that the canopy is meant for cooking under it, that the compressed gas cylinders are secured, that there's a fire extinguisher and the like. So we have been sending people out on overtime every weekend pretty much throughout our entire tourist season, and we have not recovered any costs for that. So that is a place that we saw that we were spending a lot of money and we're not recovering anything. Wildland Urban Interface Code Defensible Space Inspection. This is another set of inspections that we have not been charging for in the past. When a home is built in the Wildland Urban Interface area, it requires 2 inspections. It requires a pre-vegetation inspection, which is the first 10 feet from the footer. That has been done by community development in the past with no face-to-face fire inspectors. And we found that that was causing us some problems because we have a 3-page document that tells contractors and homeowners what they need to do with vegetation management to pass their final inspection. And somehow that document gets lost, so we were coming up to the end of the inspection where they were getting ready to get the final on their homes, and some contractors were having to spend quite a bit of money in order to meet the requirements of the Wildland Urban Interface Code. So what we decided to do is we will be taking on the inspections. We will go face-to-face with the new builder contractor. We will tell them right from the start what their requirements are going to be, and actually that was brought to us from a contractor in town who said, you know, if you told me earlier in the project what was going to be required when I have all the heavy equipment there and I don't have a house in the way, I could get it done much easier and at a much lower cost. So this particular change in the way that we do business was brought to us by the contractors, and it appears that they're liking the idea that we're going to be out there face-to-face with them in the beginning, and we're going to be giving them more information and making it easier for them at the end of their project, both cost-wise and time-wise. And then the same-day inspection fee, also as Randy spoke of, normally this will end up being an after-hours inspection based on the fact that our inspection schedule gets filled out of track it when we open up the computer in the morning. So this would incur overtime, so it's $75 an hour for the same-day inspection fee.
Councilman Shiska.
Yeah, Don, appreciate you getting up here. You're doing a great job. Do you also have a schedule to adjust fees like the building department was talking about?
No, we've discussed it, and because we have done fees on the same cycle in the past, we're looking at any way that we work with fees in the future will be exactly the same. Like I said, we brought fees together in 2007. We're bringing them together now, and as we're looking at the adjustments, we will work the same adjustment in, so the fees will stay the same between building and fire. They'll move up and down the same.
Thank you.
Councilman Lozelle.
Yeah, Don, your hourly fees, do they start when you hit the site or like an attorney all the time in the office?
It'll actually happen from the time we pull the permit. So if we have an inspection come up, at that point, once we have the inspection, then we have to go research and we make sure about the site. We know where we're at. We know anything that's happened in the past. So we're committed to that inspection from the time that we pull it out of the printer.
Okay.
So, Chief, how many inspectors do you have?
I have a plan reviewer / inspector. His primary job is plan review. I have a second full-time inspector who does the state, county, DHS inspections. He also does my public education, and he does the fire prevention inspections that aren't done by engine companies on the 2-year cycle. And then I have a part-time inspector that I've been using for special projects, one of which being the commercial kitchens, and I'm about to assign him to another special project for pre-planning larger, more complex structures in the city. So I have a combination of 3, but really only one that's committed to development.
It's a lot of work for...
Yeah, they stay busy.
Yeah.
And as Randy said, we presented these at the same contractors meetings. We've had meetings with the Contractors Association, and we had no negatives associated with bringing these fees forward in our meetings. As a matter of fact, a local fire protection contractor actually thought that we should increase one of our fees for the larger projects. We had to go to an hour-based fee process. We don't have the same ICC, International Code Council matrix that the building department uses. They don't use that on the fire side. When you saw that he came up with that number and it had multipliers with it, we don't have that. So we can't look at the cost of a project at being $15,000 for a sprinkler system, and there's no multiplier that says that it should cost a certain amount. So ours was based solely on hourly. Any questions?
Any other questions for fire? Okay, thank you.
Okay, now planning and zoning.
Mayor and Council, I will talk about the planning and zoning related fees and adjustments that we're proposing. In a similar situation to the building fees and the fire fees, these have been periodically updated. It's been some time, approximately the same time frame as the building fees, since planning and zoning related fees were updated. So these fees have slipped behind the time, so to speak. We were also looking at our fee adjustments to address the same intent to improve cost recovery to a higher level, closer to 100%, whereas with the others, not at 100%. Most of our fee increases are incremental increases, just given the time between the last fee adjustments and our current adjustments. But in some cases, we had situations where we either didn't have a fee established at all while we were actually performing certain functions without fees. So we were doing it without charging any type of cost recovery. And in those cases, I'd like to hit a couple of those as high points rather than go through the entire list. Again, most are incremental changes to existing fees. You'll notice in the very beginning there's a special use permits fee. Right below that, we've added a new fee that we didn't have before for height exceptions. What we've noticed over the last several years is that when we have a special use permit for height increases, exceptions in the form of telecommunications towers, some other types of structures, that the time involved, the staff time involved in those, and the public content that generates that staff time is significantly larger because a much larger area is affected by those types of special use permits. Again, the radio communications associated with telecommunications facilities are the prime reason for that. So we've proposed to institute a fee that's somewhat based on our contact, the level of contact that we typically would have with other fees, such as rezonings or, again, special use permits. So that fee is a new fee. We haven't charged any additional or special fees associated with those height adjustments in the past.
Okay, question, Blair?
Thank you, Mayor. George, if, as I look at this and look at the conditional use permit and the process that's associated with that, there's a fee of a proposed $975, and that's just to get your face out there and ask the question about having a conditional use permit. What if I'm denied? Do I still have to pay that fee?
The fee is an upfront fee, and it's intended to cover a series of things, mostly staff time. All of these applications involve a review by not only the Community Development Department, that's building and planning and zoning, but also many other departments. It very often involves other interviews or reviews of plan submittal and time involved, and all of them require public notice and public content. So there's a great deal of staff time involved in spending face time with the public or spending communication time with the public associated with these fees.
How much negative feedback do you get from that? I mean, if the process is stopped based upon a denial, then there's not ongoing work that takes place with the postage.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Why wouldn't there be a discount if, just asking the question, because if it's cost recovery, we're taking people's money and we haven't fulfilled our end of our obligation or our cost recovery process. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to me if there was a denial, there should be a denial return fee, because we're not truly recovering anything after the person's mad and goes away and they don't get a rebate because their project failed.
That's true. But if you look at the costs of the application and you look at the amount of staff time that it takes to get that application in front of the Board of Adjustment, most, if not all, of that application fee is consumed to get them in front of the decision-making body. And then once that decision is made, there's very little that we charge that's sort of leftover fees that don't cover our costs.
I would think that if there was follow through on a conditional use permit after it was approved, there would be employee costs and
there could be after that fact. We haven't built a fee in to cover any additional costs beyond the approval process, except that normally, following that approval process, something else happens. You get approved for conditional use to build an additional building on your site. Well, the next step is to submit a building permit application, and then the cost recovery sort of shifts from one concept to another. Now we're cost recovering the building permit process rather than the conditional use. The conditional use is the precursor to everything else that occurs.
And I understand that. I'm just putting what the last two presenters said, $75 an hour, and then I equate that based upon $2,000 or $3,000 and how much time staff has spent on that project, I find it a little bit excessive to think that we're using that much staff time to bring it in front of people. Just my suggestion.
Thank you.
Councilman Lozelle?
Thank you, Mayor. To add to Steve, and George, we look at, what, 8 to 12 of these a year, 14 at the most. I mean, there's not that many change of use or special use permits. I mean,
That's correct. Typically, it's a reasonably small number, but again, it's somewhat
and being
variable.
have been served on that board, staff does put, for the majority of them, yeah, there's an exception, what you're talking about, Steve, but that's rare. Most of them go all the way. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. And also, I would have to say, it's to deter them. It's a little bit, instead of, I want to add an extra, or I want to put it 10 foot closer to the road. I'm going, well, let me see if I can do this. And you throw it in there, it costs nothing. You're spending a lot of time on the staff's end to get your answer. So I think it actually, if you're serious about it, then you're going to pay the fee.
And we do have a process to allow for a partial refund of an application if someone stops before we get very far along, before we're spending the public's money through our staff time. If they stop the project early, then we certainly do have a refund at that point.
Is that handled through the community development director about
Yes,
how
it
much
is.
the fee should be refunded?
Yes, it is. So we also have a couple of other fees on this page that I would like to point out. Generally, when we have a major general plan amendment, that major general plan amendment is part of something that follows through with a rezoning request afterwards. So we process them concurrently, and staff time is fairly equally divided between the two as they move their way through the track from application to an approval. But occasionally we will have an application for a plan amendment, a general plan amendment, without a rezoning associated with it. It's not necessary, absolutely, for them to move forward together if there's no immediate development proposal in the work. On those rare occasions, we've proposed to add a fee, basically a standalone fee, that's equivalent to a rezoning fee, because the amount of time it takes to work these things through a process, the amount of staff time involved, is approximately the same. So we're adding a new fee for those standalone general plan amendments that we rarely get, but when we do get them, right now there's no fee for them. So again, relatively minor process. We also have a couple of new fees that I think are worthy of discussing for comprehensive sign plan, for one. You've seen several comprehensive sign plans come before council over the last couple of years. They can involve a lot of community input, in some cases negative, in some cases positive. There is no current standard fee for them. We're proposing a fee of $850 to make it equivalent to the processing time for some of our other fees that were shown in the first part of this table. Those types of things are, again, an attempt to cost recover some of what we're doing as far as staff time goes, so that we're spending less of it as less taxpayer dollars and more of a direct payment from the applicant who gets the direct benefit from the approval process. The other fee that I'd like to point out that's a new fee is the temporary commercial sign fee. We had a sliding scale process for any sign permit that's still in effect with sign permits, but we applied them to banners and temporary signs, and it really wasn't an equivalent or a cost recovery situation with those, because again, time is involved in those processes, those reviews of them. We also wanted to take into account some simplification of the fee schedule for sign companies because of some what we perceive will be a new and larger desire to have temporary signs on private properties because of the council's action related to signs in the right-of-way recently. One of the things that was discussed during that presentation to City Council and prior to your action on it was that we would be amending the city's sign codes to allow for those temporary signs on private property at an easier process than we currently have for it. One of the ways to do that is to just standardize a flat fee that covers enough of our cost that it fits into our cost recovery scheme, and that's what we propose, the $75 for those temporary signs. We're anticipating temporary signs to be probably limited to 180 days apiece. That's something that's still in the works. We're going to have a discussion about that at our Unified Development Code Committee tomorrow to get their input on that concept. If that's the case, then a commercial business wanting to keep a temporary sign all year would purchase 2 permits over that year's period. One other fee that is new that I'd like to point out is the fee for an application to go before our Historic Preservation Commission. We have a lot of reviews for building construction modifications or sign changes within our historic districts. Right now, those applications go to the Preservation Commission at no fee. There's no cost associated for the applicant. It does take both planning staff and historic preservation staff in order to process those applications, and this seemed to be a reasonable cost recovery again for that type of application.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. George, we can go back to the temporary commercial sign.
Yes, sir.
I know that you mentioned from our last discussion about getting the temporary signs out of the right-of-way. I look at this and we were trying to, we're restricting one area in hopes to loosen the restrictions in the other area. And a fee increase for a sandwich sign, or not a banner, let's just use a banner because sandwich signs are out, but a banner, now if you want to have a grand opening, you got to pay $75 more to have a grand opening, or actually not, it's $45 more. I just think that now we're raising the bar on that end, and that's my opinion. If we're going to take the grand opening sandwich signs away from them and now raise the rates on a banner, I think we're going the wrong direction on that. So I just want to put my 2 cents in.
Just one point that I don't think we made, or maybe I did make partially. The intent is to allow for a temporary sign for 6 months, effectively, for that $75, rather than our current fee, which was approximately $50 per banner. So in fact, for a business may well end up paying less over a full year if they have multiple events, because they're purchasing a half a year temporary sign permit in effect.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Regarding the annexation up to 250-acre fee of $2,500,
Yes, ma'am.
it seems to me that this high of a charge for a one lot in the county annexation into the city is high compared to the cost of considering an annexation that's much larger, maybe 245 acres of raw land. How can you justify charging the same fee for 2 very different circumstances?
The process involved for the annexation, as it's set out in state law and our local requirements, is the same whether it's 1 acre that you're annexing or 245 acres. There is a scaled difference in the amount of public contact and notice involved with much larger ones. Generally, the larger it is, the more contact you're going to have with nearby property owners. But the steps that you have to take are the same regardless of the size of the annexation. The only time that really changes is when you go over the 250, and now you have an entirely different process that's controlled by our separate local regulations. Mm-hmm. So we felt that pretty much the amount of time and effort involved in an annexation review and approval process at staff level is the same whether it's an acre or 240 acres.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this briefing?
Thank you.
Any other questions before I go to the public? Ma'am, would you come back up? I think Councilman Shiska had a question for you.
Yes.
I guess thank you for coming back up.
Oh, thank you.
My question for you is, so if in fact you were saying they should charge by the hour rather than charge by the event?
Well, I would prefer there wasn't a fee for those houses, but I know
Okay.
there's not a way to, it'd be discriminatory to allow them to have different fees than, say, a sober home here in town, because they're falling under the same ordinance there. But I would say that houses for developmentally disabled people, generally, they're much smaller, and they're heavily regulated by the state, so there's a lot of people that come in every month, including myself, DD people, that kind of stuff, to make sure that everything's kosher. So just because the buildings can change in size and time that it would take, I think it would really benefit the smaller developmentally disabled group homes to have an hourly fee. That way their costs aren't going to be the same as homes that make, millions of dollars a year, or whatever it is that the sober homes make. The income there is just drastically different between the group homes for people that are disabled and mental illness, and then people that pay $30,000 for a month's worth of treatment.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Councilman Lozelle.
I have a follow-up question. Just roughly, how many of these examples can you think of in the city of Prescott?
In this city, I personally have, oh man, the small homes, we probably have around at least 6.
Okay.
That I deal with personally. But there are other people that do my job that have other caseloads, and there are different companies. I think we have like Aries, Nepsky Consulting, Rest Care.
If you had to guess, is there 100, less than 100?
No, it's a very small percentage of the 100 and some housing that are going to be affected by the ordinance. It's a really small percentage, but it would be very beneficial for them. Because for one example, as far as you can imagine, the state has really come down as far as resources for these people, because they're very heavily reliant on state resources. We have one household where someone had been doing so well on his behavioral goals that they took his one-on-one away, which for us it means that the reimbursement from the state is going to go down for him, but the household itself, the people that actually care for them, felt that he still needed a one-on-one care because his roommate has seizures, and if the one-on-one care for both of them allowed them to have 3 caregivers at a time, so if she was ever to have a seizure, he wouldn't be able to run out the front door and run away while people are caring for her. And so they're actually taking a loss right now on one of my clients just to make sure that they have those 3 people there. And so, I mean, any little bit of anything will help them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
A question for Randy on this topic. Is there a provision for waiving permit fees for circumstances that might warrant lower fees?
No. When the fees are set and adopted by council, we can't change them.
And
okay.
I also wonder too, when they do the inspections, if they do have some kind of violation, because I'm sure you're aware that caregivers are paid very poorly, and so they end up with a lot of underqualified or undereducated people taking care of other people. And so I know that one of the ordinance rules was smoking. It had to do with the people that work there not smoking on the premises and that kind of thing. Is that correct?
That's a different discussion, is the smoking one.
Well, if they were to find them in violation of anything when they showed up, there's going to be additional fees on top of that, aren't there?
If there are re-inspections, there are additional fees for the re-inspections.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, smoking is a different issue for right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if it fell under the same thing or not. But
Right. Anything else?
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Hello, Sandy.
Sandy with Yavapai County Contractors Association. It would be very difficult for me to let this opportunity go by. I'd like to start with the building fees with your chief building official, Mr. Plummer. We have been very deeply involved in vetting these fees. They've done a fabulous job in being extremely transparent, and we've touched on every single one of them. I need you to know that without a doubt, you probably have one of the finest building departments in all of Yavapai County. And I mean that very sincerely. We are involved with every other jurisdiction from top to bottom. And the work that this team puts out right here in the city of Prescott far surpasses any other jurisdiction with the amount of less staff. So kudos to our building department. The fees, we do support them for the building. Some of these fees are going to make better contractors. We do have contractors that try to circumvent the situation. They want Mr. Plummer and his staff to do the work for them. Can't imagine that. So I think that these fees are going to make them step up to the plate. They're going to become better businessmen. So we need to do this. We should not, Councilman Shishka, look at what other jurisdictions are charging and their fee structure. We are a standalone unit, and as our city manager said, we cannot be compared. There's too many apples and oranges, and what we're doing is working. And we're a different animal in the city of Prescott with the lots we have to build on, our fees, our plans, our plan review, a number of oddities. And I think we're doing a fine job there. And cost recovery, I understand it, Mayor. It's unfortunate, but it's a step we have to take. And I think as long as it's balanced and we keep it justifiable, we should be able to move forward with that. So again, kudos to our building department. And I do hope that you support those fees. Fire, Chief Devendorf, we again worked very closely together with all of those fees and total transparency. He was absolutely correct that some other builders did come forward and say that fee is too low, let's take a look at it. He was a little misleading, I think, when he said that some of the builders like what they're doing with the wildland urban clearing brush. They don't like it. They absolutely love it. So fabulous improvement, great way to go, and together we're working on a informational letter for the builders and homeowners as owner builders to make this information more understandable. So your fire fees are in line. I do hope that you support those as well. Planning and zoning, I do have a couple comments. You have some fees up there on that board that are well in excess of 100% cost recovery. Not justifiable, not fair. And just because Mr. Worley says that some of those are minor processes does not mean that you have to assign an outrageous cost recovery fee to it. We need to be reasonable in what we do. And I understand the predicament we're in with the city of Prescott, but by working together, we will all get through this. There is light at the tunnel. I see it, I know it, and I believe it. But let's just not gouge and assess a fee wherever we think we can. It's going to come back around. So we do have some issues with some of the planning and zoning fees, and I would like for you as a team to take a closer look at those. But wholeheartedly and 100% do we support building and the fire fees. So thank you.
I got a couple questions for you. Councilman Shishka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sandy, I appreciate your comments.
Thank you, sir.
The key to what I wanted was I want to get it right the first time. And I think that I want to make sure that we're not spending another 14 years and all of a sudden we go, we need to raise these fees. So, I appreciate Randy's evaluations. I appreciate your comments, but I certainly want to get it right the first time and make sure that we have a way forward?
I feel that we definitely need a way forward, and I feel that that's out there. To get it right the first time, it's not going to happen. You know, it's trial and error. And by constantly looking at this and talking and vetting out the situations, we will get it right. May not be the first time, could be the second or third time, but we will get there as long as we don't try to ramrod it right out of the gate. Because you're looking at an industry, Mayor and Council, this industry is what's keeping Prescott afloat right now. I mean, we're out there building, and you're going to get busy. You are going to be so busy, you're not going to know what to do. So we should hire more staff, but we'll talk about that later. But we're going to get there.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandy, not to get into deep in the weeds here, if you had to pick one of these things on the planning fees that you have a problem with, which one that would be?
Would you go back to the first sheet, please? The major general plan amendment, you've gone from $702 to $3,000. That's a 327% cost increase. That's well in excess of 100% cost recovery. The other one is the $212 to $500. That's 135% increase. And then the minor process for the, gosh, my glasses, I'm sorry, are so foggy. That was, yes, the standalone. Thank you. So that, you know, Mr. Worley calls it a minor process. Well, the fee is outrageous for a minor process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question here. Councilman Blair.
I don't think I have a question. I want to thank Sandy and the group for working together. And I think you're right. From my standpoint, you know, from the very beginning, Prescott is different than Prescott Valley. From one being a town to one being a city, one being chartered, one being unchartered, one having specific municipal activities that take place that are different than what takes place in Prescott Valley. The very style of land lots that we have to build upon, there is major differences between one community and the other, and I don't think we should ever compare ourselves to that. But yet, I agree with Steve's comments. We don't want to be back here a year from now saying, why are we raising these again, and our contractors questioning why we didn't do a good job up front to vet this so it's not coming back a year from now.
Totally agree with you. And I feel that the movement and the momentum that we have, because of the hard work from your staff, that won't happen. We will get it right, just not the first time.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we need to look at how the planning department calculated their fee increases. To me, it's not just a percentage of the increase. In the past or currently, we may be way undercharging, and what you brought for us, you told us, is based on cost recovery. So I have to believe that it's based on a calculation that you figured out. Perhaps if you could provide us with those figures, we might better understand why you came to the figure that you did.
Any other? Come on down.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Ron Owsley, and I'm a home builder in town, and I only build here now. I did build those other houses out in PV, but so guilty of that. I'm not very formal, so if I respond to any of you by calling you by your first name, it's probably because I already know you and used to call you that before you got where you are. So I got a couple of dogs in this fight. I live here and I only work here, and I actually work here a lot, almost every day, at least every week for sure, interacting with all these folks and the fire folks. My family's been here since 1866, so it's personal to me too. And I can tell you, besides building the houses, I sell most of them. I live up in the preserve. I build in that rock pile up there, and it's really tough every time somebody they're sold on everything. We've done the tour. We've taken them to the lakes, to the golf course, whatever they need to do to fall in love with Prescott. Then we sell them a house. And they always ask me, is there anything I should know? Is there anything wrong? And we have to talk about the $70 million bucks. I got to explain to them that we're doing something about it. And I want to be part of doing something about that. So I'm very supportive of the fee increases. And again, to your point, we can't do it all at once.
Sure.
And I think one of the things they've done when they did this analysis, and I haven't talked to them about this, but I can see it happening. Our house costs went up a couple $1,000 this year because we're getting closer and closer to adhering to the international building codes for energy. Next year, we're going to get hit with a couple more. So after we take this increase, which I think we should, can we revisit it and maybe take another little bite in the future? Sure, that's probably reasonable. So I think it is good to do it in smaller bites. You know, the fire and the building department, I interact with them on a daily basis, and I can tell you they're doing more with less now than they ever have. They're processing more permits. They're doing more inspections. They're getting it right. They're improving the processes. Permits are coming out faster. Just in the past few months, we've seen a dramatic improvement in that. And they're all working really hard. They're helping each other out. Nobody's pointing fingers. They're doing things to help us. That builder that got real involved about the fire mitigation, that was me. It was my own house. And we're going to a place where we can do it ahead of time for a few $100 or maybe $1,000. Whereas after the house is built, you can't get equipment in there, wood chippers and chainsaws and things. It's thousands. It was a huge difference. So anyway, they're doing a great job. And I want to support passing the fees on. The two concerns I have with the fees, I understand. One of the things that we also don't see every day, the building department takes hundreds of phone calls a week from contractors who just either don't want to drive down here or they just want an answer on the phone. Well, we don't have a staff back there to answer the phone all day long. There's no way for the inspectors to even return all those calls. So I think if we go to a same-day inspection, we need to make sure, charge enough. They really want to think about it before they pay it. So that's one concern I have. And I think that the minimal amount that the fire department is going to affect us is well worth it for what we're getting. And because it's important to get the fire stuff right, not just the sprinklers, but with the interface in the wildland areas. So anyway, thank you guys. And do you have any questions for me?
Yes, Councilwoman Wilcox.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh,
I forgot
okay.
to cancel it.
Any questions for Ron? Comments?
Just thanks for building in Prescott.
Yeah.
I only do my work. I don't go outside of Prescott, so I appreciate what you do there.
There's no better place.
Thanks, Ron. Any other public comment? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next subject.
Item 1B, conceptual designs for the Marina Street, Carlton Street, Alarcon Street, and Bashford Courts parking lot improvements.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Henry Hash, Public Works. Telling Steve, I forgot why I came here today, but we are here to speak about something that's a bit more exciting. We are certainly excited. I know, and we clearly understand your message and your direction. We want to provide the best customer service we can for our citizens anytime possible. And that's why we are here before you. As you know, we, Public Works, we do tens of millions of dollars of projects every year, whether it's in water, wastewater, roads, or many other areas. And I think it is our responsibility and obligation as public servants, when we are doing a project and we are going to spend millions of dollars, take a hard look at what it is that we have what do our customers, our citizens expect? What do you expect? And that is why we have started to look into this project we call landscaping or conceptual design for our different projects, the water or wastewater. In this case, we are talking about roads, especially projects near our downtown area. These projects that we are going to talk about today did not come up because we want to do beautification or traffic calming. They were due for reconstruction. We have done in the past, go ahead and replace the pavement and the sidewalk and curb and gutter. If you don't do anything else, frankly, next time that this comes due would be 20, 25 years from now. If we have the opportunity today to do some improvement with minor cost increase, now is the time. We wanted to come before you, before we really go talk to the public, but we have had the opportunity to discuss with several people, which we have, our consulting engineers. Most of you have come to visit us. We have brought it to your attention, and it seems to be very, very supportive. I think so far 100% of people who have known about it are extremely supportive and excited about this. Here today we have Mr. Michael Bird. He's the executive director of Prescott Creek. We have talked to him about because water quality is a big deal out of it every time it's possible. We also have Mr. Steve Morgan, who is a local architect, and he's helping us with one of them. One thing that Mr. Morgan said at one of our meetings, I really wanted to hear this from everybody, and I have, is I've been wanting to see this for 20, 25 years, so it is. We're going to talk about a few projects with your permission, Mayor and Council. Charles Andrews, our city engineer, is going to talk about part of it, mostly design, and Steve Orr is going to continue about some of the construction, and later we'll be happy to answer any questions we have. We are here before you because we want to talk to you first before we set the public meetings to discuss this. You need to know first. We hope, with your permission, we can set those meetings, and some of these projects, with your approval, are going to happen very soon in the near future, this construction season, and some maybe later. With that, unless you have any questions, and they're going to bring a lot of whether it's improvement in pedestrian safety or bicycle safety every time that is possible. Thank you, Steve. With that, I'll ask Mr. Charles Andrews to take over.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I just want to spend just a few minutes and kind of get into a little more detail of the streetscape, the concepts. They're fairly straightforward. The design elements that we'll be discussing are raised median islands, bulb outs at the intersections, curb islands, and bioswales. So they're essentially design elements. Now, we're not going to apply it on every project, only if it makes sense. So sometimes we'll apply some of these concepts if it makes sense, some of the projects, and some projects, maybe the roadway is not wide enough or something about it, we can't apply any of it. So it's really project specific, and that's really important to understand. A very good example is a wide street. A wide street that's notorious for speeding. Years and years of resident complaints. What do you do? What do you do? Well, one of the things that works very well is bulb outs at the intersection, because what it does, it basically channelizes the vehicular driver's view. That's what we call channelizing. It kind of narrows it down. The same thing is true with the raised median. They no longer see a big wide road in which to speed down. It kind of removes a little bit of asphalt from the equation. It kind of narrows their view, and what do we do? We just naturally slow down. Kind of a proven design concept. Also, the bulb outs also, not only does it help to slow people down, but it's been shown that it really helps pedestrian safety. Instead of the pedestrians kind of being tucked away at the ramps, at the corners, it kind of brings them out closer to the travel lane. And that's especially important. So if you're in a car, this person's not out here, outside your vision, it's closer there. And especially at night, it's nice to see that person, you know it's there. Because even, it's happened to me even, you know, going around to take a left, I didn't see that person. So it really helps when that person is closer to the travel lane, you actually see it in your vision. Also, the bulb outs, you can also add like landscaping components to any of these concepts. The bulb outs, we can beautify it. It can look very, very nice. Also, not only does raised medians slow down or decrease vehicular speed, but it can also be planted and beautify the street and the neighborhood. After the landscape establishment period, 6 months, maybe a year, and depending, the landscaping would not require any more water. So again, after the landscaping gets established, disconnect the water, and it will survive on its own. And depending on the project, it's possible to even use the street drainage to water the trees and plants. And there's also a water quality and a water quantity component to it, which makes it better. So we're talking about vehicular safety, we're talking about pedestrian safety, we're talking about beautification, and we're talking about water quantity and quality. All these components have all of it. So another tool is the curb islands or swales. Again, these are basically constructed near the existing curb, and again, it kind of narrows the driver's perspective of the roadway. So it kind of narrows it a little bit. People slow down. The good thing is the bioswale. It's in a very cost-effective way to basically reduce the quantity of drainage, but also because the bioswale is collecting sediment, it's a very cost-effective way to collect the sediment so it doesn't ultimately get into our tributaries, our creeks, and eventually, in some cases, into our lakes. So again, depending on the project, these design elements can make a lot of sense. There's a lot of value. And if it doesn't make sense, we don't do it. Another important consideration is that it needs to work for everyone. I'm just going to kind of fast forward here. Went one way? I pressed that one. That's the bad one, right? Thanks. Thanks, Steve. So again, it needs to work for everyone. So before we came to see you all, we've had many discussions with all the city departments: solid waste, fire department, water resources, field and facilities, police department, parks and rec, and the community development. They provided excellent feedback to the concepts. And in some cases, based on their feedback, we're not going to do it. But overall, I can say that they were very excited about it and very supportive. They do like it, and they see the value of it. Now, with that said, I kind of provide a little bit of detail on the design components, kind of break it down to try to understand them. Next, Steve has some graphics where he actually takes these design components and actually incorporates it into some upcoming projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. What we want to do is, Charles and Henry gave a great overview of the program and our approach to the various project. But now I want to kind of give you an overview of how are we considering applying these and a few examples of types of projects and which elements fit with each project. The first one, this is a Marina Street between on the right is Gurley, and the left-hand side is Goodwin, near the library in the upper left. Union Street's in the middle. What we're looking at in that top half of the exhibit here is the existing green or landscaped areas that are in that area. Marina Street is due for reconstruction, so we have an opportunity to clean up not only the traffic flow but pedestrian and offer some stormwater quality enhancements, which over time will help us with our TMDL issues and the water quality throughout the city. Individual projects may not do a whole lot, but cumulatively they will improve the water quality. On the lower half are the areas in the concept that we're looking at, utilizing some of the areas that are restricted from parking due to traffic safety issues, expanding some of the landscape areas that exist now, improving sidewalks along the county building on the lower right. Currently is that unimproved area where cars park haphazardly. There's no pedestrian connection through there. For this example, we're including a 5-foot sidewalk along that area to improve the pedestrian flow and connectivity. We're also looking at continuing the use of either stamp-colored concrete, the brick pattern that's used for the existing pedestrian crossings around the square, trying to enhance the pedestrian experience in the area to improve the beautification of the area with very little cost increases. We've also looked at considering reducing the space for pedestrians to cross streets, like on Union in the middle. You see right now that it's very wide open. There's a lot of vehicle circulation issues where people do a short turnaround out of the intersection. Hopefully none of us, those other people. But what we're looking at doing is channelizing the intersection better for vehicles, safety. So this is one example. We've taken this one project a little bit further and gotten some landscape architectural assistance in what could this really look like. This is a preliminary concept of how we could treat medians, how could we treat the bulb outs Charles described from a landscaping area. On the lower right, again, there's a wider colored area. That is, in this particular project, a possible area where we can do some water quality treatment. You need a little bit bigger area to try to get a good benefit from the stormwater quality, where it would be a water filtration area. The water would settle and then be filtered before it continued down the street. So we're trying to reduce the amount of pollutants that get to the creeks. Another project that we're considering, not quite as far along, but what we're looking at here is Larkins.
I got a quick question
Yes.
for you. On Union Street, with this bulb out and the entrance median, is that going to help help identify whether that's a street or a parking lot, and if so, where to park?
Oh, at Union?
Yeah.
Yes, because Union is kind of a interesting facility, we'll call it. It has a lot of parking lot features, but it also has some street circulation connectivity features. These bulb outs and center islands that we're proposing not only will improve how it looks operationally, it'll help define the area a little bit better. And looking to the east and west, it'll look smaller. So it looks more parking oriented, which it really is. It's more of a parking lot that functions as a street.
I have a question too.
Yes.
On the Marina Street details, you have trees shown in the graphics there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do we know if those trees are going to require supplemental water?
Very good question. As we look at the landscaping in general, whether they're trees, shrubs, whatever the landscaping evolves to, it's all geared and coordinated with our water resources people, where it's low water to drought tolerant. We're looking at only using limited amounts of water for a plant establishment, and then looking at, as Charles mentioned, how can we utilize the street drainage that's already there to get water into some of these areas to supplement whatever naturally would fall on it. So we're very cognizant of the water usage, and any intentional water use would be for a very short period of time. For the plant establishment period, maybe a year.
Could we also look at rainwater harvesting from nearby rooftops in cooperation with the private property owners?
We could. That would get into a interesting partnership where we're taking private water and watering other areas. So we could consider that, but I think it might get a little complicated.
Well, I think it's worth discussing with the property owners because there's a benefit to them to have an improved streetscape.
Absolutely.
And also, there's a benefit to the stormwater drainage in general. We've all seen how in a monsoon storm downtown, the downtown streets can be completely flooded. And the Oktoberfest a couple years ago was wiped out. Barrels of beer rolling down the street.
Councilman Blair.
You know, I like pictures and designs, but what I would really like to know, Steve, and there's a cost factor to everything we do. Is there a way that you can figure out the difference between all these amenities that are quality amenities, of course, but to the bare bones of, you know, striping and redoing the asphalt and leaving it as it is? What's the difference in the cost of the two?
We don't have the exact figures at this moment, but we're looking at possibly a 10 to 20% cost for the combination of all of these improvements. On one hand, just a straight repaving the road and restriping it can do, you get the job done. However, you don't improve pedestrian safety, you don't improve the traffic and transportation safety. A lot of the parking that's out in some of these projects that we're looking at are too close to intersections where cars are either backing across crosswalks, blocking visibility that have just happened over the years. By providing some of these enhancements, we're improving the safety overall. We're lowering the speeds in some of these areas. We may not do something like this on a Montezuma street. We may not do it on a local residential street in a subdivision. A lot of these improvements that we're considering are closer to downtown, where we want to enhance the economic viability of the city by having people enjoy their experience longer, not just come in and go.
I appreciate that. It's close to the library, and that area does need to be improved. What I was really trying to get at, 20% doesn't mean much to me if it's 20% of 3 million or 20% of $1 million. You know, I mean, what does that really mean on the overall scope of things? Because I think it's important that the community know that.
Sure. A lot of landscape, again, on a block-by-block basis, I could see the landscaping being in the $10,000 to $20,000 range for all of these landscape enhancements. But what that does is that not only is the intangible of the beautification, but it's also the help in the stormwater quality areas, enhancing our drainage improvements and drainage systems. So there's a lot of additional benefits that are not as tangible.
What's tied into that for maintenance? Because here's one of the problems that I have. We did a street improvement program several years ago on Montezuma Street. Some of the trees have felled, so what do? Instead of replanting them, we cut them off and we cap them. You know, if we're gonna do this, let's do it and make sure they're maintained. There's money to maintain it, and then if they falter, if they die, we replace them. Because it looks horrible to walk down Montezuma Street in front of Whiskey Row and several other places where now you just have a metal grate and no tree. So there's got to be a replacement cost tied in, or a responsibility of someone to take care of this vegetation that we're dealing with.
Very good question and observation. When we worked with the Recreational Services Department, that was one of the questions that we had a lot of conversation on. Within their existing maintenance duties, one of the things that we talked about was incorporating low or no maintenance to any of these plants. We're not talking about a very dense vegetation improvements. We may not do a whole lot of trees because you get into other issues with trees, with leaves dropping, which is another maintenance issue. So and also the lines of sight at intersections for the visibility at corners. We may not have all these trees that are shown here. So this is a very preliminary look at what could be there. We haven't gone through the public process. We haven't really gone through our details of the traffic safety and the traffic engineering requirements for visibility and such. We haven't gone through the maintenance aspects. This is mainly an overview of what these are concepts and ideas. As we move forward to the final construction of some of these improvements, some of these elements may fall off. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe we're adding, 50% to the cost, which isn't a smart idea. So these are just concepts, preliminary applications. We want to brief the council first. Then when we go out to the public meetings for each of these projects, we'll incorporate other feedback and evolve the project and move it forward smartly.
Thank you.
Councilman Lozelle. Thank you, Mayor. Steve, I'm excited about this. You guys have covered not only resurfacing and striping, but you've organized the parking. You're going to help us with the TMDL. You're actually going to slow down water, the water, so that reduces the erosion. In pedestrian, and some of these it's bicycle. And then the establishment period, Steve, we put all of those one-year establishment on campus. And every now and again, if we hit a drought period, we'll have to help them along a couple months, once a month or something. But that's been a rare occasion. As far as, I agree with you on that. We had a tree there, and now we got a steel grate. Steve or Henry, when you're out doing your street maintenance, doesn't your department look at that? Is that part of that pothole maintenance budget?
That's part of street maintenance. Yeah, that's part of field of facilities, the street maintenance division, separate from public works. But we have talked with them about how do we maintain this.
Oh, street maintenance, like street repairs, not under public works?
No.
Oh, okay.
But we have talked with field and facilities where that is in their purview, and they're supportive of this. But we did talk about street sweeping, snow removal, and trying to incorporate those tasks with some of these improvements to make sure we're not doing something that affects negatively another division of the city.
Thank you. Councilman Chiska.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Steve, I really, really, really appreciate all this.
Thank you.
I can't tell you how much I'm pleased that we are contributing more and more and more all the time to the renaissance of downtown. And the fact that we are tourism here in Prescott, Arizona. And the easier people can get around in town, the nicer the surroundings, all it's going to do is add to that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's our hope and goal as well.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Before we start modifying the design because of cost concerns and maintenance concerns, we really should consider volunteer efforts to help us with maintenance. We have two gentlemen sitting in the audience who command legions of volunteers who do an amazing job of maintaining our trails and our greenways and Granite Creek, Watson Woods.
Yes.
And there is a Master Gardeners program. There are property owners along these streets who would be happy to help out.
That was one of the things that, I'm assuming you're talking about Michael Bird and Prescott Creeks. That was one of the time, they were in the office on another matter, and we shared briefly the concept with them, and as in a few minutes, if mayor's desire, they may say a few things about this concept, but they even brought up the idea of adopt a planter concept, where we can offer, it's like adopt a street. They keep it clean. This could be another opportunity for that public-private partnership. So there's a lot of great things that we can do as a team.
Steve, one of the most beautiful views of downtown is Union Street. And just to be on that street today and see the work that needs to be done on it. So this will make a major difference.
Thank you. This is a step in the right direction.
I'm glad it's right in the middle of it all. Thank you.
We're trying. Okay. Is there any other questions on the Marina Street concept before we move on? Okay. As we move on to another application of these concepts, we're looking at Larkin Street between Sheldon and Gurley. Again, this is a very wide street that's due for some pavement rehabilitation and reconstruction. We looked at the enormous width of the street. It's a lot of asphalt to maintain, a lot to sweep, snowplow, and such. The parking is not very organized. So what we're trying to look at here is on the south end at Gurley, trying to incorporate some stormwater quality elements as water comes from south to north, trying to filter the water before it gets going down towards Sheldon. We're looking at, in this case, a raised planted median. We're looking at improving the operation of the Willis and Alarcon intersection by adding the bulb outs, reducing the pedestrian time crossing the street. On this street, we're also having the travel lanes behind the parking and the median. The lanes are actually a little bit wider than our standard, so that we can address some bicycle improvements where we can have some what they call sharrows, which is a painted mark on the pavement that tells motorists bicycles are going to be traveling down here, and it gives the bikes an indication that, you know, there's some indication to drivers that they're going to be there. So this is one opportunity where we're able to provide a lot of elements into this project. And then on the north end, we have just a decorative flat median area because of some circulation issues with the adjacent business. So again, we're trying to adapt the project and with the concepts of how we apply them on a project based on what else is going on. A lot of the green areas that we're showing here are places where parking is not permitted, so we're not losing a whole lot of parking opportunities. There are a few space loss on a project like this, but in essence, it's based on traffic safety why they're going away. We've got two more little projects, similar concepts.
Mayor, if I could, on that last one.
Sure.
If you go back to that Alarcon, is that Alarcon?
Yes.
A few questions, especially near between the church and Washington. It's called Washington School, I assume. This whole road is a parade staging area.
Yes, it is.
Would that still allow those floats to stage there during the parades?
Good question. Good application. Yes, the pavement width between the parking area and the median is, I think, 17 to 18 feet wide, which is a very wide travel lane. That would allow the parade to stage while having one-way traffic on the opposite side of the median still circulating. So it actually improves circulation. It's kind of an added bonus that way.
Okay, and my other question is, I think the Lions does a breakfast there semi-annually, twice a year. Will they still be able to hold that there with?
In the street?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. There's no reason why it wouldn't.
And this new concept won't interfere if the school district eventually repurposes Washington. They'll be able to access, get in and out of that one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Access is not prohibited at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Another project that we're working on, in fact, this is an in-house design project that we're doing under Charles's direction, is that we're looking at Alarcon Street, which is the up-down on the right street, and Carlton Street as it traverses between Montezuma, which is on the left side of the diagram. We're looking at applying similar stormwater quality opportunities. We're looking at improving the pedestrian connectivity. Even though Carlton is a very wide street, we know it's a heavily used detour street when there's activities on the square where we're closing Whiskey Road or some of the other, Whiskey Row, sorry. Some of those other streets around the square, this is one of the major detour routes. So we felt that since that's occurring, it's probably not the best candidate for a center median. So we're trying to be smart about how we apply all these features. We're looking at improving the pedestrian connectivity, beautification. So this is another example of that. Any questions or comments on this one before we go to the last one? Okay. Again, another type of project we're working on is behind Bashford Courts. The existing parking lot that you can see on the aerial behind this is angled parking. If you've ever used the parking lot, it's extremely tight. It's below our standards. You get a couple of larger vehicles and it locks up. So we have an opportunity to do some improvements in here. How this project came to be is that we were looking at improving the drainage behind the Bashford Courts area, because right now it's on the north side, and after a snow or after rain during the winter, it doesn't thaw. So this project started as basically a drainage project. The project includes the roof drains going straight down underground into an underground drainage system, and gets the water off the area more efficiently, so we're not going to have as much standing water, standing snow, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to improve that. Also, a lot of the green areas here provide some water quality opportunities in addition to the landscaping. We're improving the circulation of the parking in the parking lot and providing better trash service on the right in the alley, adding motorcycle parking, and ADA compliant parking spaces. So we're looking at, here's another application for a public parking lot, utilizing the same concepts that we have. So this is pretty much what a programmatic approach we're doing to all of our CIP projects, and applying these as appropriate, but at least we're considering them everywhere, and as we can, making these types of improvements. And I think Henry has a closing comment, and then we'll...
I'll get a couple questions.
Oh, sure.
Councilman Blair.
It's not often that we have a chance to thank you guys for doing stuff or talk to you one-on-one about things that are on our mind, and I just want to share kind of a lone wolf for you that I wish somebody would look at, and that's from Gurley Street to Goodwin on the west side of Charlotte Home Museum. CC&J, very poor access, a lot of pedestrian traffic, antiquated concrete roadway. So at some point in time, if that could be looked at, it would be appreciative. You talk about streetscape. It is the west side of our downtown Prescott, and it looks awful.
One of the projects that we have in the design is not quite to the same level as these, is Summit Beach in McCormick.
That is perfect.
All around Charlotte Hall. That's another project. We've met with Charlotte Hall, and they're excited about some of the application of some of these concepts.
Yeah, this is great, and I appreciate this. It's something that we need in the community, and as Steve put it, I think sums it up pretty good. We're a recreation tourism town, and the better we can do it around that whole big block around downtown, the better off we're going to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
I'll hold my comments till after Mr. Hash has spoken.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, Henry, and staff, I just want to reiterate what they had mentioned before, Steve, is this is as projects are on the docket to do, and why not step them up while they're on the schedule. And I just see this as pulling what everybody loves about downtown and let the whole city enjoy what we love downtown a little at a time. It's a comprehensive plan, but thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for listening to us and your support. Good points. We would like to bring tourists everywhere. You know, Alarcon between Sheldon and Gurley, we don't need 65 feet plus of pavement that is in bad shape. I generally don't see many people walking in their tours in the summertime. Once that happens, you will see many people. And so we hear you and the public loud and clear. One thing I'd like also to mention, to the best that we can, we have a limited staff in engineering design, but on Alarcon Carlton, for example, we are doing that engineering in-house. If we hire the consultant, that's easily $300,000 project, so we can bring anything we want, and just our partners have been more than supportive. So I want to thank you, Mayor, unless you have any questions and desire.
Well, do you want your guests to come up and have a couple of minutes apiece?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Bird. I'm the Executive Director of Prescott Creeks Preservation Association. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group today. I know you wanted to limit public comments, but I just wanted to start off with it's been a real pleasure for Prescott Creeks to work with Henry and his staff, just kind of spitballing some of these concepts. Our interest, I think, is primarily on the water quality issues. Last time I was in front of this council, or the previous council, I guess it was, we were speaking about the water quality issues and the state's total maximum daily load plan that they had just released. We kind of think of that as a pollution reduction report. Some of the targets that were set there were pretty steep, and a lot of those targets were assigned to the city of Prescott and Yavapai County. This type of project is just the type of project to begin addressing those water quality issues. Those water quality issues are non-point source. We can't point to that pipe or this property and say, if we fix that, the problem's solved. It's what's coming out of our pets, it's what's coming off our rooftops, it's what's coming off our roads. And so really many projects throughout the watershed, throughout our community, are what's going to solve that problem. Our organization over the last couple of years has been working on those types of projects. A lot of folks call them green infrastructure. Sometimes you hear it called low impact development. But the way that we think about it is you get nature doing what nature does. You slow that water down, let it soak into the ground, let plants take up those pollutants. And so we actually did, over the last couple of years, we implemented 2 projects on 2 city properties in partnership, largely with the Parks Department. Over at the Raleigh P. Simmons Adult Center on Rosser Street, we did 2 biodetention basins and then a rain garden in front of the building. And then over across the street from the hospital in the Whipple Basin, right next to the Taco Bell restaurant, we fondly refer to it as the Taco Basin. But, you know, we implemented these on a different scale than is being presented today. This is a much smaller scale that's being incorporated into other capital improvements that are being made in the city. Those projects have had a little over a year, year and a half, maybe 2 years to kind of grow in and establish. We've been doing monitoring along the way, trying to get a sense of how much are we reducing the pollutant load. Just this winter, after one of our snow events, we did some monitoring, and saw really promising monitoring results. At each one of those sites, from the top of the site to the bottom of the site, where the water enters the site and leaves the site, we saw about a 50% reduction in pollutants. So that's just one sample at one point in time. You know, we're not going to hang our hat on that and say this is where it's at. But it really indicates that we're moving the right direction. So we really applaud the city and encourage the city to continue having this conversation, looking for ways to implement these types of projects. The 2 projects that we implemented with grant funds from the State Department of Environmental Quality, those were fairly expensive projects. We went in, we did those specifically. They were, again, much larger in scale than what's being discussed here. But they were standalone projects really designed to stimulate this kind of thinking. We use those as a showpiece. We invite community members to come out. We lead tours at those sites. And really, it's not just the city and the county and the public entities that need to be doing this sort of stuff. We all, as citizens, need to be doing these sorts of things in our backyards and on our businesses. So it's really going to take a community effort. I think this is a great start. There are a lot of details to work out. There are a lot of questions about, can we still drive there? How are we going to maintain it? But I think some creative ideas have come up today, and we look forward to continuing to be part of that process. So I'll take questions if you have them, or I'll yield to whoever's next. Okay.
Nope, appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Steve Morgan, local landscape architect with Landscapes for Life. I've been practicing in the Prescott area for over 30 years. So, as Henry mentioned earlier, when I was approached to be part of this process, I was excited because I, and along with some other local designers, we've been wanting this kind of change and this kind of forward thinking for easily 20 years, easily that. One of the things that has always bothered us is we tend to repair things and leave them kind of as is without thinking about this is the opportunity right now to make improvements. Prescott, you know, everybody's hometown. I never felt like it was a hometown if our streetscapes looked like a Walmart parking lot. What is attractive about Prescott? If you think about the courthouse area, we have trees. We have a lot of softening of the hardscape. And that's one of the things that is lacking in so many of our streetscapes. And so when I was approached and asked to be part of this, it's like, absolutely. And as Henry also said, if we don't take this opportunity now to add a pretty small percentage, I don't know what it is, but it's a small percentage compared to the entire cost of this, we're losing a 20 to 25 year window. A 20 to 25 year window of making people feel more at home, creating more pedestrian kind of feel and bicycle kind of feel throughout our whole town, expanding that out. So it's an incredible opportunity. So I'm encouraged by what I've heard today from council. And one thing to think about, Councilman Blair, I was happy to hear you actually bring up the fact of maintenance, because that's something that it happens so much. We invest, and I see it on a lot of residences too, we invest a lot of money in making something look really nice. And then what happens? We lose trees. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, and hopefully with the master plan for the streetscape, where the funding's coming up here in the next fiscal year, of getting a strong maintenance plan in place. So those kinds of things are actually in a sequence. So it's not a surprise. It's something that's planned for, because it happens. We've also, the plantings, one of the things that we had was a conceptual plant palette. And my firm was part of a group years ago, actually, we've been working on this for a long time, of working with a plant palette that City of Prescott promotes. And mainly it has to do with, it's not just native plants, but it's low water use. The whole idea is to lessen our water use. Any way that we can do that. And so our firm actually did the conceptuals that you saw up there with the colored trees and everything on there. And this is conceptual. A lot of it is, we're trying to make it look nicer, more comfortable, soften the hardscape. At the same time, using plants that are lower water use, will establish quicker, have fewer problems. And then also looking at how we put those in there to make sure that we don't have high maintenance with them. So it's a balancing act, but that's our job. That's what we try to do. So I appreciate what I've heard here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Wilcox, I think you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to express my support for these types of projects. I think they will enhance the quality of life in Prescott. And we don't have to look very far to find other communities that are doing these kinds of things to enhance the quality of life in their downtowns, especially Wickenburg, Phoenix, Tempe, Tucson. They're incorporating all kinds of green infrastructure, landscaping, bicycle, pedestrian safety things that are all planned at the same time and coordinated. And if we get it done now, we will be way ahead, and it's a good thing.
Any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay, thank you. Move on to the next item.
Item 1C, presentation on the implementation of a city business license.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, sir.
Just to clarify, this is our second meeting on the proposed business license. I had the milestones up here just to talk to them for a minute. We initially introduced it back on the 2nd of February, where we talked about the concept. Today, we're bringing some more details of what, to get discussion going on what the business license will look like, what it'll do, what's the purpose of it, with the intent of taking that information today from council, that discussion, and putting together an ordinance for further discussion on April 4th. So with that, getting into the background, a business license, of course, creates a registry of businesses, helps confirming location and other information about businesses. It helps in compliance with the tax code, with the fire code, zoning code, building and safety codes, and also enhances economic development efforts to reinforce the city's finances and competitiveness. The annual license, and this is a big part that we talked about, the annual license fee will be revenue neutral. The point of the license is just to cover the cost of implementing and managing the license. And that's key. It's not a revenue generator, it's revenue neutral. And we feel simplicity is the key with minimal information, the essential information, to make it very straightforward and make the payment method as easy as we can. So we're looking at, for discussion purposes, the business activities to be licensed. So it would be most businesses and other persons who conduct business in the city with certain specific exemptions. This would include businesses located within the municipal limits and also those with physical locations outside the city but doing business within the city. Each place of the business would require a license. So if you have 2 stores in town, you need a license for each one of those. We would be suggesting a single license for a multiple professional at one location. For instance, like a law firm would need 1 license, not a license for each lawyer. Or beauty parlor would need 1 license, not a license for each beautician operating out of there, that type of thing. Some of the exemptions that we would be proposing or bringing up for discussion today. Schools, obviously, churches, not really intending for all nonprofits to be exempt, but for churches. So a nonprofit thrift store, we would propose would need a license, where a church, a place of worship, would not. Governments, political organizations, any of those groups around town would not require. Homeowners associations, we're not seeing a benefit to having them. But again, it's all open for discussion today. Also, casual activities such as yard sales, sale of personal vehicle. If you sell your personal vehicle, obviously we would suggest that be exempt from needing a business license. Persons under the age of 18 engaged in part-time work, that type of thing, would not need a license or a seasonal activity. Sale of agricultural products by residents, farmers markets, those type of things could be exempt, may be exempt. The transient merchant, peddler, solicitor, and our special events are all already an established code that we have, so the business license would be supplemental to those. It would not include those. It would be for the businesses that are permanently located or permanently doing business here. And again, businesses, another example of an exemption that we see when we look at other cities around the state. Businesses with a physical location in another city, and they're only coming into town to deliver, like furniture. So you bought furniture somewhere else. They're just bringing it to your house. Again, up for discussion, but we would probably suggest that that would not require a business license for just dropping furniture off that was pre-ordered outside. Different than people coming into town and selling furniture.
We got one question. Councilman Blair.
Activities on the plaza. All those merchants that are conducting business in the city of Prescott, would they be required to have a business license?
Again, those fall under the transient merchant, peddler, solicitor, and special events, which we already have codes for those. So we were looking to exempt those or not include those in the business license because they have those separate codes.
I would suggest, just my personal opinion, farmers market has a authority over the people that work at the farmers market, and they pay a fee for booths. So maybe just charging the farmers market Inc. as one business license, conducting all those booths might be a way to do that, to keep from having too many exemptions out there. And I also look at churches. They function not only as a worship facility, but they're also a business in a way that creates a lot of public involvement inside buildings and inspections, those kinds of things. And if somebody's coming in here wanting to know if they're going to set up business in the city of Prescott, certainly they would want to know what kind of worship facilities we have here. And by being able to track those different worship facilities through this business license, if it is cost recovery and it's not about putting money in our treasury, I think that'd be important to put them on there as well.
So to include churches, not exempt them.
Now we can exempt everybody.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Mark, would this include, would the exemptions include, say, a service business like an appliance repair that's actually got a physical location in, say, Prescott Valley, but they do a lot of repairs in the city limits?
That's different than just dropping off merchandise. We would suggest or look that those would need a license. So if you have a appliance repair place that's in the county or in Prescott Valley, but you're doing business in the city, you should have a city business license.
Okay, thank
in
you.
our opinion. Again, these are open for whatever council desires.
Okay.
Mark, I'll ask this question because I've heard this discussed on the radio with I used to have a home business out of my home, skincare products, and that was doing business in Prescott. Should that also be, I would assume that someone that's doing business out of their home is doing business, would recommend that that be part of the...
That is the anticipated plan, that
Okay.
they should have a business license if they're doing business here in the city.
Even though it's out of their home?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
As residential rentals or out of residential neighborhoods, they would need a license as well, any of those things.
Okay, great.
Councilman Shiska.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, I know that Prescott Valley seems to be a nasty word today, but realistically, in my business, if in fact we have a competitor that seems to be successful with something, we are not doing our business well if we don't pay attention to what they're doing. And so I'm looking at, it shows in Prescott Valley, in describing their business license and the criteria, it says these businesses conduct substantial activity within the town. So we're not talking about, Ma Kettle, selling
We got to be everybody.
something out of her house in that case, are we?
I mean, substantial is a hard term. I turn it
Well, I
over to
think we'd
legal.
have-
I think you want quantifiable terms in your code.
Everybody.
Well, I think we'd probably have to determine that, but, certainly looking at, the way they phrase it, because they've had a business tax and we haven't, that seems to be pretty effective for them just to say substantial.
City Attorney.
We do, as part of the exception slide or exemption slide, that, casual activities can be, and there's a specific reference to sale of personal vehicles, but for instance, a casual activity would also include someone selling yard furniture on Craigslist, sort of one time every now and again. The difference with Councilwoman Orr's example is selling products, having a home business, which is allowed under the zoning code or land development code, as long as it doesn't generate, and you can't bring customers in, you can't have, auto traffic, parking issues, a lot of activity. So in other words, it's sort of invisible to the neighborhood, but you can still run a business out of your home. That's an allowable use for the home. But if it's a regular ongoing concern, and it's not related to sort of how much revenue or the percentage of revenue you make, but if it's a regular ongoing concern, that would what we would look at as something that wasn't a casual activity.
Sure.
But it is, as Mark was saying, it is sort of difficult to define every possible scenario. But if someone has a sort of regular business going, even though it may be part-time or it may not generate a lot of income, that would probably still fall into the business license requirement.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Mark, excuse me.
Councilman Blair.
Yeah, now that I sit here thinking about churches, I think about some of the other things we're talking about, and if the business license, like Prescott Valley, they state right in their business formula that as part of their economics of their community is making money off their business license. If we're truly going to be cost recovery, I look at the last minute stuffer bazaar things they have at the Armory and those kind of things that are in competition with the other businesses in the community. The question becomes is whether they should be. And my thought with the churches is they hold special events for all kinds of different things, whether it's a Boy Scout troop that they sponsor or whether it be any other thing that happens inside that church where it would cover all those activities. Question becomes, again, is where do you draw that line between who's conducting business in your community? Yeah. It is conducting business in the community, by the way.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the last time we discussed this, there was 2 of us missing, maybe? I think, Billy, you were gone. And Gene, I think you might have been gone, yeah. So I'm going to summarize what I said before.
I heard you on tape, but never mind. Go
Then
ahead.
I won't. But I just want to reiterate some of the things we're talking about here. Is the reason, this is my opinion, that we're looking to do the business license. The 2 major reasons is recovery homes, and it's the first leg for a business tax. That's how I see it. If somebody is not going to conform to getting a business license, there's very little chance that we're going to catch them. We're just after the low-hanging fruit. People who've got storefronts, people that are just honest to do it in the first place. If you're not getting a TPT tax right now, license, you're not going to get one of these. So there's the proposal to track TPT through this. If you're not getting your TPT already, you're not going to get this one. So that's kind of a moot point, again, in my opinion. I don't know why my daughter could go cut lawns and babysit and not need this, but Vicente Landscaping does. Because of her age, she's still bringing income and competing against Vicente or a daycare center. So there's just a lot of inconsistencies, and it's just one more layer. I don't know how we're going to enforce this. For 35, 25, it's not a cost neutral. That is such crap. It's not cost neutral. I'm sorry. I can't support it.
Continue.
Enforcement, talking about enforcement, it would be under, penalties would be under City Code Section 1-3-1, same as a lot of our other things. Failure to obtain a license would be covered there. Any revoking of the license for non-payment or those type of things would be covered there. Looking at the information, again, we talked about simplicity, looking even at PV or other cities and our own tax license. We're looking for the name, the physical location, contact information for the public safety, mailing addresses, phone numbers, email address, emergency contacts, the start of business, if they have a state sales tax license, getting that number so it can be correlated to that business. City license and a tax license, since both will be administered by DOR within a year, probably. Business ownership, what type of business ownership is it? And then what type of business, what are they doing? Is it a retailer, a restaurant, a construction, babysitting, landscaping, whatever? We'd go with that as our main information. Of course, if there's other information the council feels is important, it'd be good to include that, because of course we can't give any data or demographics on this if we don't collect it. But we don't want to make it too complicated for the people.
Excuse me, Mayor, if I can. I just am so confused about what is the whole reason behind the business tax? And to be very candid with you, is it about the sales tax department looking at people once they're required to have a business license, whether it's the drug and alcohol homes, and now that they've changed their use from single family residential to rental, is it the hopes of your department that once they have a business license and we know what kind of function that they're doing, that we can now say to them, you owe us bed tax as well, you owe us rental tax? Are we trying to do this because we're missing out on collecting taxes in other places in the community?
We definitely, as we talked about, is to confirm the location, is to help with fire code implementation, zoning code, building safety, and the tax, as you say, Councilman. You know, if somebody comes in, oh, I need a business license. We get a lot of people that come in, I need to get a business license. Well, we don't have a business license. What are you doing here in Prescott? You know, what's your business here in Prescott, so we can see if they need a tax license. But it's to have that information so that we can follow up to make sure they do have the tax license and that they're paying the tax and that type of information, as well as the demographics for economic development and the community as a whole, and the emergency contacts for these businesses for public safety.
I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Councilman Lozelle.
We go back to economic development. If you're an attorney, you're with the bar. If you're medical, if you're a doctor, you've already registered with the state, with the feds, with every other agency in the round. I call the city of Prescott to address home-type businesses. Under the guise of opening a multi-level marketing, Amway, Avon, what have you, I asked for a listing of all of those. You know how many they had? 0. So people aren't conforming there. Again, we're hitting the low-lying fruit. If a group home, we've already got ordinances in place. If a group home is operating without being registered, which we have now, we fine them, we get the rental tax. We have tools in place already to address those. And adding another one is just, I can't, no.
Councilwoman Orr.
You know, I understand that this has come before the council 4 or 5 times previous years. I believe had a business license, business registration, I would prefer to call it, had that been done years ago, there are issues facing our city right now that we would not have. I just feel that we don't know who's doing business in Prescott. And we should know who's doing business in Prescott. If you're in business, which we are as a city, we should have basic information. Who's doing business, who are they, what type of business is it? It can help us not only with public safety, but economic development. And then we just have a knowledge. It's so hard to sit up here as a council sometimes. And I actually heard, about a year and a half ago, someone ask one of the council members, well, how many of those businesses are there in our town? We don't have a clue. Someone said maybe 130. Someone else said, I think probably about 300. The truth is we don't know. So whether we're talking about sober living homes or we're talking about recovery, whatever it is that we're talking about, we really don't have the data that we need here on this council and in our city. So I think that this is our responsibility. I think this is, as responsible council people, that we need to get a hold of this type of data about what's going on in our town and right underneath our noses. Thank you.
Councilman Sichka.
Thank you. I think it's important to put all this in perspective, and having gone to the neighboring communities' websites and taken a look at what they say about their business license fees, just to quote from Prescott Valley, it says, the purpose of a business license and license fee is primarily to regulate and fund regulation of the quality of business activity that occurs or is transacted within the town limits in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the town, and secondarily to raise revenue for the town. So they actually say
it's a revenue enhancement.
It's a revenue enhancement right on their website. And so my question to our city attorney is, I've heard that from somewhere that it needs to be revenue neutral. Is that something that's actually coming down from the state?
Well, I think, Councilman and Mayor and Council, the distinction between a fee and a tax is a fee for service, which is supposed to cover the cost of the program, whatever that is, building fees, fire inspection fees, community development fees, business license fee. The state, the city charter as well as state law allows for two things. It allows for cities to implement a business license program and charge a fee for that business license and generate revenue to cover the cost of that program. State law and the city charter also allow for a business tax separate and apart from the transaction privilege tax, which in our situation, and I believe in the state law, that business tax can't be directly connected to revenues or gross sales or something like that. In other words, it can't be another TPT, but it can be sort of a flat cost. So just from what I'm hearing, what you read, it appears that Prescott Valley may have adopted a business license that implements both a fee and some sort of tax to enhance revenue. I think the process here at the direction of the council was to sort of bring this forward in two steps. One, to talk about the business license, and if that goes forward, then to talk about a revenue generation tool of business taxes in that sort of flat fee structure we've talked about before. So I can't speak for Prescott Valley and their concept, but you know, if you go to the next slide, I don't want to get ahead of Mark, but sort of proposing a $35 annual license fee. It's well below Chino Valley, well below Prescott Valley. So, administration of the program, this number, this $35 is, obviously an estimate of what it costs to run the program based on the number of expected licenses. You go above that, and it could be deemed a tax because it's generating more than the cost of administering a program. So, whether it's $30 more, whether it's $1,000 or whatever that number is.
Do we already have in place the assets to handle this program?
What do you mean the assets? We have a computer system with an application that we can redo to handle a new business license. We currently have staff that is processing tax returns. As that transitions to the state, there will be that staff resource would either need to be reevaluated in size or retasked to this.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
And Mayor, if I could, on that first element that you read about sort of regulating the quality of business, I don't think that it's intended to mean that the business license program in Prescott Valley actually is sort of like the Better Business Bureau. It's closer to, is the business you're licensing allowed in that zoning? Is the business you're licensing following the laws of the state, following the fire code, following the safety code, those kinds of things? So if someone violates the zoning code or violates the county health code and doesn't do what they're supposed to do, we can then use that to pull that business license and then legally stop them from conducting business until they comply with the law. It's not sort of, hey, you overcharged this person or you didn't refund this person, those kinds of things, which is sort of more of a Better Business Bureau kind of factor. So I think that's what they're talking about in terms of regulating the quality of business, is making sure that the business follows all the other laws in town. And the one tool of making sure they do that is if you revoke the business license for violation of other laws, then they're not legally allowed to do the business in the town, and we can go get a court order saying, an injunction saying you can't do it.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
I fully support business license program and a business license tax. If I remember reading somewhere that Prescott is one of only 4 cities in Arizona that does not have a business license program. I think it's time for us to catch up. Councilwoman Orr and I were, I think, the only 2 council people who went to the Central Arizona Partners breakfast last week, where we heard presentations from all 4 Quad Cities economic development directors. And the point came across that we need to know what businesses we have in order to recruit other businesses into our community. They always ask us, who's here? What are the support services? What am I going to get? Who am I going to connect with? This is extremely important to our economic development. And as far as a tax is concerned, let's be clear, this is a segue into a tax. I don't have a problem with that at all. The challenge will be to figure out how to structure that tax, definitely. So we start with education, some publicity. We're not going to capture every single little business in Prescott and get them to register and get a license. In the same way, we don't get all the zoning violations that occur or all the crimes that occur on a daily basis. Some of them come and go. Right, Chief? I mean, enforcement is just one of those things you keep trying to do, and public education is a very important part of that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Harry. I guess what I heard today was that we're looking at a punitive measure as justification. We can come and get you. That's sort of the way I hear it. And if you don't do what we're asking you to do, here's what the results are going to be. That's the way I hear it. Now, I understand, I thought I heard earlier in another discussion, we haven't gone out to places we know are doing business in town. We know they're here. When's the last time we did code inspections for fire safety for congregate living? Well, what I was told is that's on a 2-year rotation or a 6-month rotation or some rotation. I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that those fire inspections are being done on a bi-monthly basis or on an annual basis or any of that. Same thing with a lot of your thrift stores, these dilapidated secondhand shops that have things piled up by the boxfuls in front of their doorways, prohibiting people from getting out and getting in safely. Walk into a restaurant and the floor is falling in. You know, where's the inspectors, guys? Now, I'm not saying I'm opposed to anything. What I'm saying is somebody's not doing their job. Anytime that you've got someplace open to the public in the city of Prescott, and we know that there's issues and we acknowledge there's issues, what have we just done if we don't enforce the codes that we already have? You know, I'm not opposed to a business license. What I'm opposed to is that it's not being enforced on everybody equitably, and it won't be. And I understand that, just like the speed limits, and I used that the last discussion. Just because so-and-so has a heavy gas pedal doesn't mean you take down all the speed limit signs, but you make it punitive when you catch them. If you don't make it punitive, it doesn't mean squat. I don't know how else to put that.
I guess one of the comments that I have is, you know, when we see sales tax collection go to Phoenix, will a registration help us in determining who should be paying TPT and have that as a cross-reference against a listing we get back from Phoenix, the Department of Revenue, to make sure that they've captured everybody? Because you know, the thing I'm worried about is when you have centralization, as you're going to have in Phoenix, people could very easily slip on a radar. And I see this as a way to make sure we get back all our tax money. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, it definitely is a tool for that. You know, we will be getting detailed reports from DOR per the IGA that we entered with them. So we will be able to use that to cross-reference to make sure, you know, to make sure the best we can. I mean, we're going to need tools. This is definitely going to be one of them. And obviously, just knowing who's out there doing business, if they don't get either license, that would allow us to pursue them to get their business license. We get a lot of anonymous calls, not always anonymous, to our tax department of, do this person have a business license? Does that person? You know, we follow up the best we can with the staff we have, you know, and we do get there to get these things licensed. But this would be a good tool to help make sure that DOR isn't letting anything slip through the cracks.
I think the other thing I'd like to make mention of is speaking with Mayor Skoog, he indicates to me that they don't have any drug recovery homes in Prescott Valley. So they established their business license not irrespective of having drug rehab homes. They did it because they wanted to advance their economic development. In many ways, you're kicking our butt. And we need to figure out a way to get around that, is the way I see it. Councilman Chiska.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I know there's a lot of attitude of don't tread on me around here. And I have to tell you that as a long time businessman here in the Prescott area, it's my privilege to do business here in Prescott. And I would gladly pay a fee every year to do that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. One more bite at the apple. Here again, philosophically, I don't agree it's a privilege. I believe it's my right. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to do business. What I don't have a right to do is put other people in harm's way. And one of the things that we do is we have codes of behavior with regards to what you do when you're in the city. I agree with Blair. I think everybody who's doing business in the city, I don't care if you're a cookie maker, and I don't care if you're a mega blind hauler, I don't care if you're an attorney, I don't care if you're working out of your house, or if you're working out of some sort of a shelter you want to call nonprofit when you knock down some sort of a six-figure income. You should be paying the same fee as you're going to make the Johnny Lunch Bucket. It's just that simple, okay? And so that's where I'm at. That's where I was in the beginning, and I haven't changed that. If it's not equal, if it's not apportioned equal, I don't believe in exempting somebody simply because they hide under an umbrella someplace of being a nonprofit. That's a crock. I watch the cars some of those folks drive. They're much nicer than mine. I really think we need to go forward, but we do it in a manner that treats everybody equally.
Go ahead and continue.
So with that, the fees we talked about, as the city attorney pointed out, this is the licensing fee, not a business tax if council chooses to go that way in the future. Just the fee, we're looking at $35. Again, these are all estimates because we have no idea how many businesses are out there. We'd, of course, propose a grace period for year one as we start implementing and start educating people. Of course, some level of penalty if people fail to get a license. There needs to be some penalty so that they will comply. And there may be other fees. You know, we've talked today about fire inspection fees and other fees that are charged as they go out. So this $35 fee is just the annual license fee.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you. You answered my question, Mark. So currently there is a $35 fire inspection fee when you get your TPT, correct, Chief?
Councilman Lozelle, currently that's $40.
It's 40?
And
okay.
if I could comment for a second?
Sure.
Once we lose transaction privilege tax here, we lose track of all new businesses coming in.
So
every new business that comes in gets a fire safety inspection under the current policy. If we lose that down to the state, we will have no idea when new businesses come in. And currently we're caught up. We've done over 1,000 inspections this year, not all new business licenses. But every new person that comes to Jane at the counter gets a fire inspection and a basic life safety inspection, as well as us being able to start a database for who is in that building, what they're doing, how to contact them if there's an emergency.
Okay, I get that. But so that, would that currently stay in place, that $40 along with that $35?
We'd like to see it that way, but again, it was an extra fee on top of what Mr. Woodfield.
And again, yeah, that's council's prerogative. Is that fee on all businesses? Is it only on businesses that have customers in the door as opposed to residential rentals? I'm not sure if fire gets out on all the residential rentals out there. Is it obviously not for a business located in Prescott Valley or Chino Valley that just comes in here to do appliance repair or that? You know, those details would be up to council on how they want to implement that. And of course, fire and the staff they have to do it can't charge for a fire inspection if they're not going to be able to get the fire inspection done.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Chiska.
Mark, that's the $40 fee you're talking about. That's a one-time fee, isn't it?
The fire inspection?
Well, I mean, what is the privilege transaction fee?
Right now, we have a $25 privilege tax fee to set up the license. That is a one-time transaction.
That is a one-time fee. Okay,
and the inspection fee is also one time.
A one-time fee. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
And again, we could add that to the requirements for whatever type of business, fire and building field need to have those inspections. That's why we pointed out that there could be other fees depending on building and fire fees.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mayor, if I can, I can see how, and I get it, and I have a business license in the community, and I've moved my spot 4 or 5 times, and if it weren't for me updating my own personal stuff with you, you'd have no idea where I was at.
It's a problem with a lot of those because it's a one-time fee now that people have for decades.
So the idea would be this would be a yearly
Annual fee.
where they would update all their information.
Yes.
And I also know dealing with the Department of Tax down in Phoenix, you know, when all of a sudden I quit sending them to the city of Prescott and I send everything down there, I agree with the mayor. The accountability of the state sending it back to us, and they're already going to charge us, what, $160,000 or whatever the case may be, to now take our tax that we're charging our residents down to Phoenix and sending it back to us $160,000 short because they have to hire employees when we have our very own. I find it all a crock, but you know, I think it's important. It's important to track the businesses that we have in our community for a lot of different reasons.
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you. So, Mark, let's just assume that there's a fire inspection fee, okay? Which I'm not saying I'm for or against, but I'm just assuming there probably will be. So you come, you're a new business here, and I happen to sell wine. I have a wine bar or something. So I come to town, I pay, I get a business license, I set up my TPTA, 35, 25, 40, and I think like what, $400, $500 because I have wine in my business. So you're just keep that wallet opening and slapping down the cash for the privilege to do business in Prescott. And so we're not getting rid of anything. We're just adding something. We're adding another one, right?
You know, that's what we're talking about. Obviously, when the state takes over the licensing, the TPT licensing, we could look at adjusting those fees if we have a business license in place. Some other cities, like I believe Prescott Valley, is $2 to get your, you got to be at your state license too when you start a business, right. Councilman. So you get a state license, and to add, Prescott Valley, you add another $2 to get that license. And again, these fees are just to recover those costs. So once DOR takes over that, that's an option, the council could look at,
like
so that you're only getting the $2 for your transaction privilege tax one time, and then you have your annual $35 business license fee.
Okay, thank you.
All that's council's prerogative.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I want to take advantage of Chief Devendorf being here. You're going to get up front again, Chief. Because we kind of had this conversation a little earlier, and I just want to clarify it again. Currently in city code, there are certain classifications of businesses, which includes congregate living, which isn't just drug rehab and alcohol rehab. It's congregate living, which there's a definition of, that are supposed to get a regular fire inspection. Did I miss something earlier today?
You're actually partially right.
Oh, gosh.
I'll give you that much.
Spoken like a true.
Well, at least he didn't say partially wrong. He said partially right.
We do not have enforcement capabilities on residential properties that do not meet certain criteria. So if it's a state licensed congregate care facility in the way of disabled, zoning, things like that, if they have to have a state license, the state asks us to go in on some of those. DHS does some of them on their own. So that's one residential that we can get into because another authority is requiring they be inspected. They ask us to inspect them. Until the point that council passed the recent change to the ordinance on congregate living, homes above 4 people, where there was a requirement for a certificate of occupancy, which meant we have to get into the building, we have to measure the rooms, we have to check the exiting, we have to check the fire systems. We have not had that authority beforehand because they were still a residential operation. By making them under ordinance now something that has to be licensed, now we have the ability to go in there.
Thank you. And by statutory governance, let's take the congregate living homes out of it for a moment, and let's talk about congregate saloons where people meet a lot, and sometimes they're over capacity. Sometimes they're not functioning in the right manner. Does the fire department in the city of Prescott, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a bar, whether it's any place that's open to the public doing business in the city of Prescott, have the authority to do a fire inspection to ensure that that place is safe for people to go into in the city of Prescott?
Mayor Pro Tem, yes, we do. And
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. And I think the public has a right to know that as things change in an economy and we get better situated to have inspectors, from a public health and safety perspective, I agree with Councilwoman Orr that we have a duty to the public to perform public health and safety issues. And one of them is to give the teeth to not only the fire department, but the police department to supply two of the basic services we're responsible for. So thank you.
welcome.
Continue.
Okay, all I have left is the milestones. Obviously, we're here on the 1st of March to discuss what you guys would like in the ordinance that we'll put together for discussion on April 5th. So what I've heard is don't exempt churches, don't exempt babysitters. I'm not sure. Any direction would be helpful if council wants it to be reflected in the ordinances. Obviously, a daycare back here, but a daycare facility is not babysitting. That would be a business. The example we had here was casual activities of, yard sale of vehicles, the kid next door mowing your lawn, that type of thing, not full businesses.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Well, I disagree with Councilman Blair about not exempting churches. Churches should be exempt. A business, in the common meaning of the word, is a commercial transaction. Churches, schools are not in the business of doing commercial transactions, so they should remain exempt.
So I think what we're saying is, as long as what they're doing is for charity, it probably shouldn't be considered.
Okay.
Well, actually, can I make a clarification? So, the nonprofit retail stores are generally required to get a business license. Am I talking too long? In other words, the Salvation Army store, that they would, even though it is a nonprofit and for charity, that kind of operation would be required to get a business license. A church that's strictly a place of worship is generally not required to get a business license. However, some churches have maybe a church gift shop. That gift shop would have to get a business license. I don't know if the churches up here do, but some of the larger churches, for example, down the valley, will have a gift shop attached to it where you can buy things. That would have, a business license because there's a commercial element to it, even though the money goes to the church or the diocese or something like that. So there are 70-something business license codes around the state, and they're all pretty much the same, and they're all applied pretty much the same. And I think for Prescott, we don't really want to be that guy that's out there too far one way or the other. I think the idea of doing a draft ordinance for the next meeting in April is to sort of mirror what everybody else is pretty much doing. And I can tell you, I've looked at, I know Mark's staff has looked at a half a dozen or more. I've looked at a number as well. And I mean, they're almost exactly the same, unless there's some really odd kind of thing that the city has, in it that, that's unique to the city. But churches, schools, charter schools, private schools tend not to have don't have a business license requirement. But nonprofit stores, thrift stores, those kinds of things would have to get a business license, and so that, because if you look at the ordinances that are out there, it'll specifically say, nonprofit retail or something to that effect, because they are sort of running a business, even though it's not a for-profit operation.
But some of these thrift shops, and I guess like Salvation Army, are they required to collect TPT?
No, they are not.
No, they're not.
Okay.
So that's another issue. I mean, in other words, if you have a worship center or some sort of other service center, and then you also have a thrift shop or resale shop, the resale portion or the thrift shop would be licensed. The other part may not be. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that you typically see when you have a business license ordinance.
And I agree. I think we ought to try and do what's done commonly with other people that have business licenses. I think that's probably the best information that we can give you to go forward and continue to work on this. I want to thank the staff that has been working together to try and get this some kind of understanding that we can see where you're going with it. I think you're doing a good job, and look forward to the future meetings that we're going to have on this. Anybody else have any final questions before we go on? Okay, next subject, please.
Item 1D, legislative update.
Sure.
Thank you, Mark. Always helping. Mayor and Council, I guess I will start with just a little recap. Today is the 51st day of the second regular session of the 52nd Legislature. We're still at 1,219 bills that have been introduced, although there have been a number of strikers introduced over the last week or two. Just to point out what I'm handing out to you, I do this every Tuesday because a lot happens between the agenda going out and when I actually speak to you. One of those things happened about 15 minutes ago. So to date, although we have all those bills and we have bills listed here, I'd point out that the last day for a House origin bill to be heard in committee in the House was last Friday. So on there, if there's a bill that is only either awaiting a floor read or rules, it's still in play in the House. If something hasn't been through a committee hearing in the House, the only way for it to come back is quite a procedural move, and so that is rare for that to happen. So having said that, I only want to point out a few of these bills that are newer in the interest of time. But I do want to talk a little bit because I know how much Mayor Pro Tem Lamberson enjoys this update. So we'll take we have about 8. The first one is House Bill 2107, Substance Abuse Recovery Homes. That bill was heard on the floor and passed 49-9 out of the House today. If you saw me texting, that was what I was texting about. So that's a pretty strong show of support in the House for the bill, and it will now move over to the Senate. Our contract lobbyist, Barry Aarons, is working to try to get a friendly committee assignment in the Senate, so we can try to move that forward fairly quickly there. So I would also give a big thank you to Mayor Oberg. He did talk to a number of mayors at the executive committee, and we did get a lot of support from the Valley cities to call their legislators and try to bring those votes in. So thank you for that. Obviously, just to point out for those that might be viewing from home or streaming this live from the Valley, Representative Noel Campbell is the sponsor of that bill, and thank you to him for all of his hard work on that bill as well.
Also that I did speak to Senator Pierce over the weekend, and he feels this has a very good chance in the Senate.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thank you. We also now have, I want to point out Senate Bill 1524, Regulatory Actions Limitation, on the second page. I just want to point out there that the League is working with the Governor's Office to try to get some amendments on that bill. That's the bill that was referenced during the Governor's State of the State with regard to the sharing economy, Uberization of different types of business. I don't think we have concerns necessarily about Uber, but the way that the bill is written right now, it is quite broad and quite vague and could even potentially apply to zoning authority. So the League's working with the Governor's Office to try to get those amendments for clarity on what the purpose of the bill is, so that doesn't limit local authority beyond the sharing economy moving forward. The next bill I want to point out is Senate Bill 1523, Truth in Taxation Levy Increases. That was a strike everything. I want to point it out because what it does is limit the any city council's ability to defer multiple years of property tax increases and then vote on that in 1 year, and that happened here back in 2014 when the city council approved a tax levy that was about $410,000 higher than the prior year. What occurred there is, I'm not sure how long ago the city council actually has increased a tax levy on the primary property tax, but you don't lose the authority to tax, you just don't levy the increases. And so this would require a unanimous vote of the council to pass something like that. If it's more than 3% higher, or 15% higher than the prior year. And what has happened here is that sometimes the city council won't levy the increase. They still have that capacity available, and that would mean all 7 of you would have to agree to do that in a year. And so that's a concern, because right now that's not how it works, and basically it's the state limiting the likelihood that taxes might increase when it might be necessary at the local level to do that.
I think we're also concerned there that if you start requiring a 7-0 on one decision, they could also start looking at other things that we do and requiring a 7-0 decision.
Correct. That would be a very clever way for the legislature to continue to limit local authority and then run council candidates that would potentially create an issue over and over and over for the other 6 folks on the council.
Maybe the state election law should be changed so that each legislator must be unanimously elected by the population of the state.
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate end of this.
Well, that'd be great.
Funny you should mention that, Craig. No. Senate Bill 1516, campaign finance amendments. This would essentially completely redraft the entire section of state law that deals with campaign finance. It's quite a large bill, so we're reviewing it and talking with different clerks and also with the league to make sure that none of those changes would place an undue burden or create a conflict of interest for the appointed officials that conduct elections and are related to election rules in localities. For example, if it requires the city clerk to do something, that would essentially be putting the final authority in a person that's appointed by the very people that are being elected to then oversee her. So we just want to make sure there's not any conflict there, or if there is, that we have the authority to send that to a third party, which is what we would normally do under current law. So no really recommendation of a position there, just pointing it out in case it comes up in the future. House Bill 2024 is related to immigration law and attorney's fees. The concern there is that even if the city prevailed in a case where the city, if we are the prevailing party and we take a case through because we want to be able to enforce immigration law or to not enforce it, we would not be able to recover any of the city's attorney's fees. Which is a cost of, it essentially lessens the likelihood that the city council might actually want to take a case on. So there's a concern there about, the recovery of fees and impacting the city's decisions to move forward with litigation. So the recommendation there is to oppose. House Bill 2157, ASRS political subdivision entities, was brought to my attention by Councilwoman Wilcox. And it's something that I've been following. It's not the first time we've seen this bill. It's at least the second or third time that I've seen it in Arizona, and it might mean it's 5. I just start blocking it out at some point. It would remove prospective employees of political subdivision entities from ASRS. And so that's entities like the Northern Arizona Council of Governments, the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, SIMPO, the Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. Employees of those political subdivisions generally are eligible for membership in the Arizona State Retirement System. And so this would mean they wouldn't be members, which ultimately would likely increase the cost to all of our other members of ASRS. So that's a concern. The league has been opposed to this bill every year in the past. Obviously, they have a clear reason to be opposed to it. However, it is a concern for our partners in the region that would be impacted negatively. I would point out that this bill has stalled. It did pass House Cow on the 11th of February, but it hasn't moved since then, so that's a good sign. But it's still in play. It could still see a floor vote in the next week. Then House Bill 2402, bonds disclosure notice, lovingly referred to by the financial folks as never pass a bond again bill. This would require that a city or town would place language on the ballot that shows the worst case scenario for a potential bond sale, which is about a 12% interest rate, which is highly unlikely to occur on something like a property tax bond. Obviously, those would all have to go to the public for approval. Over the last 5 years, looking at all of the bond issues by cities and towns in Arizona, the average was 3%. So you're telling people it could be as bad as 12%. Why would you vote for something like that? And so the concern there is you're basically putting inaccurate information on a bond sale, and unlikely that a city council would put something before the public if they didn't have reasons for looking at that funding source. So the recommendation there is to oppose. And then Senate Bill 1350, online home sharing administration. This is the Airbnb bill. This is one that we're really tracking at this point. Barry Aarons has been participating in some of the stakeholder meetings for that. And the stakeholders are getting together to make sure that the language, this is kind of a technical bill on how you would tax online sharing of someone's home appropriately, and getting that revenue back to a city and having the language be appropriate is necessary in order for that tax to be equitable with the tax of a hotel that's fixed base, that has a bed tax and a sales tax. And then also there are concerns from the hotel, the fixed operator hotel community about you may be taxing something, but they aren't required to meet a lot of the other regulations that a hotel is required to meet. So right now we're monitoring that and participating in the stakeholder meetings to make sure that there's equal representation for cities relative to tax, and also for the fixed businesses that have been paying tax and being regulated for quite a period of time. So with that, unless there are any questions, the other handout I have is just a number of bills that we're still tracking, but these are the bills of concern or support here.
Any questions, comments? Well, I think I speak for the...
No, I was just going to say congratulations on the one bill passing. I know you worked hard on that, so.
Yeah, and I think I speak for the council when we say thank Barry Aarons for all of the work he's doing, and we look for his future support and trying to get it through the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're done for the day. Thank everybody for coming, and we have another meeting at 5:30, which is the voting meeting.
Mayor, you read item I.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Item E, request for information regarding the March 1st, 2016 voting meeting agenda items.
Any questions on our voting meeting coming up that you would like to get answered now?
Just questions, but nothing.
Okay. Again, thank you. We'll see you at 5:30 if you'd like to come back and listen to more. Thank you. This is a marathon.
Yes, and I did not go to the
I'm going to have to figure out how much it's going to take. Trying to make sure they stay down to like 2 hours.